Hello everyone. This is your friend from Naruto Audio Fanfics, and we are back once again with a brand new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto Uzumaki learned the truth about his mother and twin sister, and everything changed forever, Naruto times Tenten times twin sister, part 2. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Naruto fanfics like this. So without wasting any more time, let's start today's fanfic. Everything seemed to be going good until Dustin walked into the Hokage's office one day and said, "I came to inform you that Tenten and Naruto will both be unable to do missions for the rest of the week, and you should pass it on that they won't be around until that time is up." The third looked up from his paperwork and asked, "Why is it two of my genins are not going to do missions?" Dustin said, "Tenten is suffering from major blood loss and Naruto is from chakra exhaustion as well as a few other problems related to his training." The third said, "I have not seen any hospital reports saying Tenten was hurt, and how is Naruto out of chakra?" Dustin looked to make sure no one was in the office and reached into his pocket and pulled out a kunai and said, "I am sure you know what this is. It's related to that." The third was wide-eyed and asked, "How?" Dustin smiled and said, "I am the only person alive who knows the secret of it, and only Naruto will know it along with my daughter Tenten. Well, I need to get back to my home and check on those two. Don't want to be a grandfather. CYA." As he walked out of the office, the third smiled and said, "This is an interesting twist." Dustin smiled and thought about what happened the day before. Flashback. Naruto had arrived at the Wolf Claw weapon shop for his daily lessons and walked inside, but Tenten was standing at the door and locked it as he came in, putting the close sign on the door and said, "Dad needs to talk to us, and he said it was important." Naruto nodded and walked into the back with Tenten behind him and saw Dustin sitting at the dining table, and he said, "I am glad you're here, Naruto. Your training has come along nicely, and it's time you learned a jutsu that I have been training you to use. It's time for you to learn the Hiraishin." Naruto was wide-eyed and Tenten asked, "But how, Dad? Nobody knows how it works. I know you can make the kunais and all, but how are you going to teach him that?" Dustin said, "Sit down and I will explain it." Both sat down beside each other across from him, and he said, "Okay, I do know the secret of the jutsu, but I need to ask you, Naruto. Are you willing to let Tenten know the secret, and are you willing to do whatever it takes to learn this jutsu, no matter how embarrassing or stressful it is?" Naruto thought and said, "Yes. I trust Tenshin with my life and that of my family." Dustin said, "Good. Now I will explain the secret of the Hiraishin. You already know that the Yondaime would flash to wherever the kunai was at, but nobody had ever figured out how he did it. The truth is, he tricked everyone into believing that he was doing one thing while he was doing something else. You see, people thought he was moving at incredible speed to make it to each kunai, but the truth is he was summoning himself to each point. As you know from your sealing skills, when you seal something in a scroll and unseal it, you are summoning it back from wherever it is. Your dad's kunai are actually the summoners, and your dad made himself the item that is summoned. The seals on the kunai are two different kinds. One is the actual summoning, while the other is a genjutsu that makes everyone see the yellow flash when he appears instead of smoke. Now that may sound simple, just summoning himself to each point, but the truth is he had a seal on his body that made it where he would be summoned safely. I don't know where he came up with the seals, but I know them. All I have to do is put the seal on you and then make the kunais with the summoning seal on them, and then have you practice learning how to deal with more than one kunai at a time." Naruto said, "So the big secret is there is a seal on Dad that actually summoned him. That is a big prank. So how do I do it?" Dustin said, "Well, the thing is I have to put a seal on you, and since your weight suit is maxed out, I also want to put the actual weight seal on you so that way you can keep upping them without having to buy a new weight suit." Naruto said, "Okay, that's fine because my old one was getting tight anyways. So when do we start?" Dustin said, "It depends on Tenten because she has the important part of this." Tenten asked, "What do you need me to do, Dad?" Dustin sighed and said, "I need your blood to mix with the ink to make the seals, so that means I am going to have you let me hook you up to that machine we have for blood seals, and no, we can't get blood from the hospital because the amount we need is more than they allow us. You are going to need soldier and blood pills, and you will also have to be there to help me if Naruto passes out or runs out of chakra." Tenten looked at Naruto and said, "I can be ready in a few minutes." Naruto asked, "Are you sure?" Tenten said, Relax, I've done it before for simple seals, so it's not like I don't know what to expect, but it will make me tired for a few days while my body restore my blood. Besides, like your mom said, I am part of your family. Dustin said. Okay, we will be in the sealing room. Naruto, follow me. Naruto got up and followed Dustin to the sealing room where they put all the seals on their weapons so no one learned their secrets, and he said to Naruto, okay, strip. Naruto blinked and asked, what? Dustin sighed and said, the seals for the 2 seals I am putting on you have to go over your entire body. The Hiraishin seal makes a small bubble appear around you, but if say I don't put it on your arm and you perform the jutsu, you could wind up losing your arm, so I have to put it on your arms, legs, torso, and head, and they have to be connected, so you have to be for me to make the seals and connect them. The same goes for the weights seal. Naruto was red-faced and said, but tension. Dustin said, we'll have to see you, yes I know. That's why I asked if you would be willing to do anything even if it was embarrassing, but I need her help in case you pass out, as well as her having to be here so I can have her blood running into my ink machine, and the fact that if you ever want to teach this to your children, someone will have to know how to put it on. Naruto sighed and Dustin said, just think of it as giving her a free show to show her how good you look, now strip. Naruto slowly striped and laid on the floor where he was told to when Tenten walked in and fainted. Dustin got some smelling salt to wake her up and smiled to himself, and after explaining what was going on and making her red-faced, he hooked an IV to her that connected to the ink machine that would mix her blood along with a special ink so he could make the seals. Naruto looked at Tenten as she looked at him, though she snuck a few glances down from his face but went back up when she felt like she was going to faint as Dustin started to work, but he stopped after a while when he got to the stomach and said, okay, Naruto, I need you to start channel some chakra so the Kyuubi seal appears, and don't stop so I don't mess with it. Naruto nods and placed his hand on his stomach, and both Tenten and Dustin saw the seal, and both being experts at seals looked at it a few moments, and Dustin continued putting the seal on. About 2 hours later, and 2 blood pills and 1 soldier pill for Tenten, Dustin finished the last seal and activated it, and it burned into Naruto's skin, making him cry out in pain, but soon passed out, and a few moments later Tenten did as well, but from blood loss. Dustin sighed and got a few pillows and a blanket and brought them over to the passed out teens and put the pillows under their heads and covered them up and removed the IV from Tenten's arm. Flashback end. Dustin smiled as he walked inside and saw that they had snuggled up together in their sleep for warmth, though he had put a second blanket over Naruto to make sure no accidents happened and Tenten's cloths mysteriously leave her body. He may like the boy and trust him, but he was going to protect his daughter as long as he could. The next day Naruto awoke and felt refreshed and saw Tenten was still out and heard a noise in another room, so he got dressed and walked into the forge room and saw Dustin working on something, and Naruto asked, so what did you mean the other day when you said that you have been training me to use the Hiraishin? Dustin stopped and walked over to Naruto and asked, do you remember the first task I gave you when you started training? Where I told you that your sword had 4 seals and you only could find 3. Naruto said, yeah, though it was a joke because I still have not found it. Dustin said, the reason you can't find it is because it is hidden. Hand me your sword a moment. Naruto pulled his sword off his back and handed it to Dustin, and he pointed to the sheath and said, since you know more about swords from working here, tell me what's wrong with this sheath. Naruto looked at it and thought a few moments before he said, the end of the sheath is flat where all other ones are rounded. Dustin nods and said, correct. The flat end down there is a special material that transfers chakra, but underneath that material there is a modified Hiraishin seal on it. Where the Kunia require a blood seal, I reworked it where you can put a temporary chakra marker on an enemy with the butt end of your sheath. That's why I have been teaching you to hit the butt end into enemies when you get an opening. If you channel chakra into the sheath like I have been training you to, then you have about 3 minutes after you hit someone with the butt end before the seal disappears, and what's best about it is since it's chakra base nobody can copy it, and unless there are 2 Hyugas and one tells the other it's there, then they won't know either. Your dad wanted it made that way, so that way if you could not pull out a Kunia because of the situation, that you could still tag someone. He took his own flaw and made it where it was fixed. Of course he had not figured out how to do it, but I came up with that. Now I want you to rest the rest of the day since you have this week off, and we will train you to use the markers. Over the next few days Naruto worked on the Hiraishin while Tenten recovered and offered advice on how to do it better. By the end of the week, both were pleased with their recovery as well as the sealing and training. Naruto and Tenten walked into the Hokage's office to report back to duties but saw Yamato was there and he was not looking happy. Naruto said, "Hey old man. What's wrong? You look like someone died." Yamato said, "Naruto, Tenten, how are you both doing? Are you ready to return for mission?" Naruto said, "Yeah, we both got over why we had to be out of service." The third said, "All right. I need both of you to get ready and meet Yamato at the front gate in 1 hour. Your teams need you." Naruto asked, "What's going on?" Yamato said, "Since you both were out, the Hokage combined both teams but took Guy off to do regular mission. A summoned dog arrived earlier this morning saying the mission they are on went from AC rank to A rank. They have ran into a missing nin named Zabuza. They had a fight and Kakashi is down with injuries as is Zabuza but they need more help. Prepare for combat and high-speed travel. Meet me at the gate in 1 hour." And left in a swirl of leaves. Naruto looked at Tenten and both nodded and Naruto said, "Tell my mom what's going on." And they both left. When they got to the gates they were just about to leave when a sudden earthquake hit and then an explosion a few feet in front of them. Dust covered the area and there standing in front of them was a huge toad. A man and 2 women jumped off the toad and took off toward the Hokage Tower. Yamato said, "Come on, we have to go," and took off around the toad which went up in smoke. Naruto and Tenten looked at the retreating figure and Tenten said, "I know the man was Jiraiya-sama but I could not tell who the 2 women were," as they followed closely behind Yamato. Yamato said, "I believe that was Tsunade-sama but I can't be sure. We don't have time to worry about it. Your teammates are in trouble." Naruto looked at Yamato and asked, "How fast can you go, Yamato?" Yamato said, "I can go faster. Why?" Naruto looked at Tenten and said, "Tenten, hop on my back. I am zeroing my weights out. I know you're fast but you also were not expecting to have to do this right after using so much blood." Tenten nods and jumps on his back and Yamato takes off even faster but is surprised that Naruto was even faster than he was now. They matched pace with each other and Naruto asked, "So what do we know about this Zabuza guy?" Tenten said, "He's a former member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist." Yamato said, "He tried to assassinate the Mizukage. According to the report Kakashi sent, he has an assistant that is disguised as a hunter nin and is skilled with senbons. Apparently a man named Gato wants the client killed and has hired Zabuza to do it. He also has some merc that we may have to deal with. Less talk, more travel." And he started to increase to his fastest speed which Naruto easily matched. Back in Konoha, the third, when he felt the earthquake and saw Gambunta at the front gate, he knew that the end was here. The end arrived a few moments later when the doors to his office were busted off the hinges and a pissed off looking Tsunade stood there and said, "This had better not be some sick joke." The third said, "Jiraiya, go get Kushina. She's at the library." Jiraiya nods and leaves and Tsunade said, "Where are they?" The third said, "Just wait for Kushina to get here so I don't have to reap." Just then Jiraiya arrived with Kushina. The third sighed and said, "Well, now that everyone's here and the door's closed, I guess I should introduce you, Tsunade. This is Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, widow of Minata Namikaze, who I believe was your son since Naruto possesses your grandfather's bloodline." As he pulled out the elemental card Naruto first used and showed them that it had wood in it. Tsunade asked, "Why do you suspect he was my son? As far as you know, I never had any children." The third said, "A. Because you would not have come back if Minata was not your son, since you would not believe Jiraiya not to come back. B. Minata gave me the clue since blondes have never been popular in Konoha. Besides you, the Yamenkas are the only other blondes." Tsunade sighed and said, "Damn you. Yes, he was my son." Jiraiya asked, "Why did you never tell him or me?" Tsunade said, "Simple. I had him a little over 9 months after losing my brother. You figure the rest out." As she sat down, Jiraiya was wide-eyed and said, "Then he was." Tsunade only nodded her head and said, "We were both too young and stupid to take care of a child and we had a war going on that we could not stop, so I put him in the orphanage to protect him. It was not until I met Dan that I felt I was ready for a family, and then I tried to find him and saw that he was with you, so I decided that it would be best if he never knew, and since you treated him as a son I thought it would be best for everyone." Kushina groaned and said, Don't tell me the lecher was me, not a father. Damn it, that makes it even worse. Remembering being put in the pervert's book. Shizune asked. Where is Naruto and his sister? The third said. Naruto and Tenten just left a few minutes before you arrived to go to Wave Country. The mission Theer teams were on turn from AC rank to an A- rank. Kushina asked. Is Sakura alright? The third said. Yes, but they ran into a missing nin named Zabuza and Kakashi been injured, so until Yamato arrives there are only 4 genins. Tsunade asked. Where? The third said. They are on their way to Wave Country. Jiraiya was out the window faster than anyone could see and Tsunade was behind them, leaving Shizune and Kushina with the third. Kushina said. You might as well stay with me until they return. Shizune said. I should be with. Anything she would have said ended when she saw Gambunta appear Aegean and take off, and she could see 2 figures on top of it, and she sighed and said, Alright, I guess that I should accept. As she left with Kushina, who was worried. On top of Gambunta, Jiraiya looked at the woman beside him and said, You could have told me. I mean, he was my son after all. Tsunade sighed and said, Jiraiya. What kind of parents would we have been? Between me being a depressed alcoholic gambler and you being a super pervert. Not to mention that if our enemies would have found out, then nothing would have been able to protect him. Jiraiya said. I know that, but still I could have spent more time with him. I could have told him who his father was. I could have been there for our grandchildren. Look, I think that's them. As he pointed. Yamato and Naruto were traveling fast when all of a sudden an explosion rocked behind them and there was the giant toad standing there. Yamato said. Jiraiya-sama, what's going on? Tsunade jumped down and looked at the group and looked at Naruto and asked, Are you Naruto? Naruto said. Yeah, who wants to know? Tenten squealed in his ear and said, Naruto-kun, that's Tsunade-sama. Naruto blinked and said, So you're my grandmother. Tsunade said. Yes, though I did not know your father was married or had children. I would like to see you use your bloodline. Naruto pulled out a seed and said, Growth. And suddenly the seed sprouted and turned into a flower. Tsunade said, So you do have it. Yamato said, I am sorry to interrupt this happy reunion, but we need to move to save your teams. Jiraiya said, Hop on Gambunta here. He can get us to Wave faster than running. Gambunta said, Why should I, Jiraiya? Jiraiya pointed toward Naruto and said, He's my grandson and next in line for your contract. Naruto blinked and said, Grandson. Tenten looked at him and asked, How many powerful ninja are you related to, Naruto-kun? Yamato jumped on Gambunta and said, Less talking, more moving. Tsunade, Naruto and Tenten jumped on Gambunta and Jiraiya said, Use chakra to hold on. As they took off toward Wave. In Wave Country, Sakura was walking through the village when 3 men walked up toward her and one said, You're one of those ninja from Konoha. You're coming with us. Sakura said. I don't think so, as she started to fight. However, since her Taijutsu was lacking and the only offensive jutsu she knew needed water, she was not fast enough and one of the men got behind her and knocked her out. The man that knocked her out said, So much for a genin from Konoha. Another man said, That's what they get for not training them like we do in Mist. The third man said, You both need to shut up. Gato made a deal with us for the capture of Zabuza as long as we take out the old man. He should just let us kill him and collect our bounty, but the Mizukage said to follow Gato orders as if they came from him. Apparently Gato and the Mizukage are close friends. The first man said, I heard that Gato is the one who is running the slave ring for all the bloodline whores we haves. Well, we better return and inform Gato we have her. And the 3 men left with Sakura over one of Theer's shoulders, but all 3 failed to notice a person eavesdropping on their little talks, as well as the fact that the person melted into an ice mirror moments later. A few hours later, though no one spoke more than a few words for the trip to Wave, they finally made it to the shore before they had to let Gambunta swim on top of the water to make it across. Kakashi sighed as he read the note that was planted on the door with a kunai and said, So Sakura was captured by Gato's men yesterday and they wished to have a trade, Sakura for Tazuna. Sasuke said, It's her fault for being weak. Neji said, It was her fate to be captured. Lee looked at both of them and said, Both of your flames of youth are demished. Kakashi sighed and then turned his head toward the bridge and said, We got company heading for the bridge. It might be Gato. Let's go. Lee asked. How do you know that Kakashi isn't see? Kakashi said. I have a kajbunshin at the bridge in case someone comes and tries to destroy it, and it sensed several powerful people approaching the bridge and it dispelled to tell me. As he got up and Tazuna followed as the genin and Kakashi left. Tenten was having to hold on to Naruto to keep from falling off when Gambunta said, well Jiraiya. This is as far as I am going. I see the bridge right there that I can see connects to wave, so good luck. And went up in smoke the moment they all set foot on the bridge. Naruto said, we need to find Sakura and the others. Kakashi came walking with Lee, Neji, and Sasuke as well as an old man and said, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Yamato. I knew I felt Gambunta coming toward the island. It's good to see you Aegean. Unfortunately that's not going to be easy Naruto. Sakura been captured. Naruto walked over to Kakashi and picked him up off the ground by his vest, shocking the man, and said, what do you mean Sakura been captured? Where were you at when she was captured and why did you not stop it from happening? Shaking him like a rag doll. Tenten said, Naruto-kun, put him down so he can explain. Naruto dropped him on his and said, where is she? A voice said, she is being held prisoner by a group of Mist Black Ops in Gato's base. They want to ransom her for the old man. As Zabuza walked out of the mist along with a masked hunter Nin. Kakashi, who had shifted into a defensive position along with his team, asked, what are you doing here Zabuza? Come to finish off Tazuna. The person next to Zabuza said, my name is Haku and I am Zabuza's assistant. I overheard the Mist Nins talking when they captured your pink-haired teammate in the market. I told my master. Gato is planning on giving Zabuza to them once the bridge builder is dead. Zabuza said, I don't like being double-crossed and the men that have her would kill me before I left the island if they could find me, and they have already killed 4 of the 7 swordsmen already. They are the Mizukage's personal black ops. Naruto appeared behind Haku with a kunai at his neck and asked, where is she at? In a cold voice. Zabuza said, I will only tell if you agree to an alliance. She is safe for now, but Gato said once the mission is complete that the Mist Nins can have fun with her, and not until. Tsunade said, you got your alliance, now where is she? Making everyone wide-eyed though, since she was a Sannin she outranked everyone there but Jiraiya. Haku said, Gato hideout is 2 miles north of the village. It's a big building hanging by some trees. Naruto said, I am gone. And took off toward the direction he could see the village, leaving a dust cloud where he was, and Lee said, he's as fast as me. Yamato said, damn it Naruto, you're not going to help her if you get yourself killed. As he took off following Naruto. Kakashi asked, Tsunade, you can't be ready to believe Zabuza and Haku. Not taking his eyes off of them. Jiraiya said, I may not trust them but I believe them. I have heard of Gato before from my spy network and he's a snake in the grass. I will agree also to an alliance, but should you try to double cross us Zabuza I will kill you. Tsunade said, take a number. Tenten, you stay with Kakashi and the others to protect the bridge builder. Zabuza, you are coming with us. As she took off the same way Naruto did. Tenten said, Jiraiya-sama, please take care of Naruto-kun and Sakura. Jiraiya nodded and took off following Tsunade, Zabuza and Haku. Kakashi sighed and said, so why were you and Naruto unable to be on our teams for the last week? Tenten said, I had severe blood loss and Naruto-kun had chakra exhaustion. As she walked over to Neji and Lee. Lee said, your flames of youth brightly ten. It's good to see you Aegean. Sasuke asked, how is the Dobi so fast? Tenten said, that's his secret. Kakashi asked, why did the Hokage send 2 Sannins as well as 2 Genins and Junin for this mission? As he looked at Tenten. Tenten said, I don't know why. You would have to ask them or the Hokage. I do know it originally started off just Yamato, Naruto and me. Kakashi asked, then can you tell me why Naruto had chakra exhaustion? As he narrowed his eyes. Tenten said, sorry, family secret. Kakashi said, but Naruto does not have any family to be secrets with. He's an orphan. Tenten said, sorry, family secret. As she looked around and tensed and said, shit, we got company. Making everyone look where she was looking and noticed a group of nearly 200 mercs were standing at the end of the bridge. Naruto was running in the direction he was told and heard Yamato yelling at him to stop, and he sighed before stopping. Yamato quickly caught up with him and said, "You know better than that, Naruto. You don't run into battle without thinking." Tsunade landed beside them and said, "Which way, Zabuza?" As Zabuza and Haku landed beside her. Zabuza said, "About a half-mile in that direction." Jiraiya, who finally caught up, smacked Naruto upside the head and said, "You're acting stupid, Gaki. Think or they will kill her." Naruto said, "I already got a plan. Come on and don't slow me down." As he jumped in the direction Zabuza pointed, leaving behind several stunned-looking adults and an AMUZED Haku. Naruto stopped at the edge of a clearing and saw the building Zabuza mentioned and said, "Hold on, Sakura. I am coming." And he put his hands in a seal and created a clone and handed it his weapons and then turned himself into his sexy no jutsu form, but with a pair of shorts on and a shirt that looked like it had been ripped off, and she was holding it together with her hand, but on the inside of the shirt she had a single kunai, and jumped down to the ground and started running toward the building and screamed, "Help! Someone save me!" As she ran toward the building. The group of adults all landed beside the clone in the tree when they heard a female scream, "Help! Somebody save me! He's going to kill me." The clone said, "Don't move. It's the real me." Jiraiya asked, "What do you mean, the real you?" The clone said, "I am a Kajbunshin who's holding his weapons and stuff." Tsunade was about to say something when she saw 5 men appear out of the door, and the girl said, "Help, that man with the huge sword tried to attack me. Help." In a scared voice. Zabuza said, "I have you know I may be in, but I would never do that." The clone said, "Just stay here and watch." It then hanged to look like Zabuza and jumped down and ran toward the female Naruto. The 5 men said, "Zabuza, what the hell are you doing back here? Gato's order is to kill you." Zabuza clone smirked and said, "You think you can beat one of the 7 swordsmen? I've come to collect my revenge for that fat bastard double-crossing me," and charged at the men. While they were distracted with the clone, female Naruto ran inside the building and started looking in every room he could find, looking for Sakura. The clone Zabuza got to about 5 feet away from the men and said, "I guess I will have to have my fun later," and ran toward the opposite way the real Zabuza was, though the clone was limping. Everyone watched as the 5 men looked at each other and started to chase after him, only to stop when the clone turned and said, "Sexy no jutsu," and turned into a blonde-hair girl, and they all flew backwards with nosebleeds, not expecting the man they were going to kill to turn into a girl. With that picture and the thought of what Zabuza was supposedly going to do to the girl in their heads, they were perverted, and the clone charged fast and stabbed each of the men in the head with his sword. Jiraiya said, "The kid is either a genius or damn lucky." The clone stopped and looked back and started to shake and dropped his sword, looking down at the bodies. Up in the tree, Yamato said, "Damn it," and jumped down to the clone, who unfortunately went up in smoke. Jiraiya looked at Tsunade, who was frozen, and said, "Tsunade, you got to get over it, and fast. The kid's freezing up and it will get him killed." Zabuza sighed as he saw the reaction and said, "First kill." Inside the compound, the female Naruto paused as the information from the clone came back, and he was starting to shake when he heard Sakura scream. Forgetting all about the kill for now, he ran toward where he heard the scream and found Sakura in a 4-foot cage, and a man was shoving a stick into the cage, stabbing Sakura with it. It had a metal ball on the end of the stick, so it would not kill her, but it would hurt her. Naruto glared and said, "You picked the wrong girl to mess with," and pulled out his kunai and was about to kill the man when a senbon needle pierced the man in the heart. Naruto turned and saw Haku standing there, who nodded. Sakura looked up and Naruto dropped the henge, and Sakura smiled before fainting. Naruto tried to open the cage, but he heard Haku say, "The key is over here," and walked over to a wall and pulled a key off the hook. Naruto nods and said, "Thanks," when Haku opened the cage. Naruto bent down and picked her up and turned to Tsunade, who had just came in, and said, "I think she's just exhausted, but could you check her? The bastard on the floor was hitting her with that pole," and handed her to Tsunade, who set her on the ground and started to check her. He then grabbed his sword as well as his other weapons that fell on the ground when his clone dispelled from Jiraiya, who had picked them up. Tsunade nods as she finished when Naruto said, "Shit. Tension in trouble at the bridge," and was gone in a yellow flash. Everyone was stunned when that happened, and they all knew what jutsu that was. Grabbing Sakura, they all took off toward the bridge, but not before Jiraiya left a little message by doing food shopping cart summon on the building. About 15 minutes earlier. Tenten said. Sorry, family secret. As she looked around and tensed and said, shit, we got company. Making everyone look where she was looking and noticed a group of nearly 200 mercs were standing at the end of the bridge. Kakashi said. Defensive formation. Tenten, you're a long-range support fighter, right? Tenten nodded and he said. I want you to cover us and the client. Neji, take the ones on the left. Lee, Sasuke, you take the ones on the right. I will take the middle and cover both groups with midrange, just you. And he pulled up his Sharingan. Sasuke glared at him and they all charged but stopped when Tenten said, Twin Rising Dragon. Causing all four of them to look at her as she jumped in the air and started throwing her weapons down onto the merc, killing around 75 before she had to land as her weapons ran out. Sasuke glared at her and started doing hand signs and said, Firestyle. Phoenix Fireball Jutsu. And shot out 7 fireballs and 2 hit a man, but he was only burned a little. Neji got into the gentle fist stance and started taking out men left and right with strikes to the heart, and Lee was using his speed to break bones and knocking people out. Kakashi saw there were only about 30 merc left at this point when clapping could be heard and all fighting stopped. Everyone turned and they saw Gato standing there with 3 men dressed in mist uniforms, and Gato said, I am sure you will have no problem taking care of them now that they are weakened. I must thank you all for killing those men, so now I don't have to pay them. The taller of the men said, we will have no problem. The only threat was Kakashi, but as you can see he's still not 100% from his fight with Zabuza, and the bloodline user will be dead before he can use it. Looking at Neji. Gato said. Good, then kill them. The 3 men nodded and walked forward, and Kakashi said, damn it. Regroup. Lee, Sasuke and Neji all backed up to where Tenten was, and Lee said, what's the plan? Kakashi said, we stall for time. Hopefully Jiraiya and the others will finish soon and we could get some more help. I just wished we could get a message to them that we need help, since Zabuza said these guys were the Mizukage personal spec ops. As they all got into a fighting stance. Tenten sighed and said, got no choice. Kakashi, we can get a message to them, or at least Naruto. Throw this. As she reached into her kunai pouch and pulled out a 3-pronged kunai. Kakashi got wide-eyed and said, are you sure, you know what this is, right? Tenten snorted and said, just throw it. Kakashi nodded and said, I hope you're right. And threw it toward the men and started to do hand signs and said, Kage Kuniya no Jutsu. And the one turned into 20 kuniyas all heading toward the men, and they were all about to dodge when they all landed right in front of them. The taller one laughs and said, the great copycat Kakashi can't even throw a kuniya. I am disappointed. Kakashi smirked, praying it worked, and said, I would take that as an insult if it had been any other kuniya but those. Suddenly a yellow flash appeared on the bridge, and Naruto turned and saw Tenten and the others, but flashed Aegean as he felt someone behind him, and when he reappeared he saw 3 ninja from mist and they were turning to attack him. Aegean, when he flashed Aegean, reaching for his sword only to flash Aegean as he pulled his sword out and flash once, Aegean appearing beside a man and slashes him in the side only to flash on the other side of the 3 and slash another man. To Kakashi, who had his Sharingan out, it was like a dream as he appeared attacked and disabled in less than a second. As Naruto finished his last flash, since after he arrived at the kuniya it went up in smoke except the real one. The 1 man on the left fell to the ground dead, but the second one replaced himself with the body of one of the mercs, and the third one fell into a puddle of water. However, before Naruto had a chance to move, the tall one who fell as a puddle of water stabbed his sword into Naruto from behind. Tenten screamed and Kakashi became pissed and was about to charge when Jiraiya appeared with a Rasengan in his hand and slammed it into the man who stabbed Naruto. Tsunade arrived moments later with Sakura in her arms, and Zabuza appeared and said, never double-cross a demon, as he decapitated Gato on his way forward where Yamato was fighting the last nin standing. Kakashi started going through hand signs and grabbed his wrist and created a Chidori and ran forward and stabbed the man in the heart. Sasuke pulled out a kuniya and charged the remaining merc who had stood to the side when Gato and the 3 nins arrived and went to stab them, but another one went to kill him and forced Sasuke to dodge. A third merc went to stab him from behind and he dodged Aegean. An axe came down to where Sasuke was and he knew he did not have time to dodge even as the axe seemed to slow down, so he closed his eyes waiting for death. Lee appeared in front of him and kicked the man away as Neji followed, taking the fight to the last of the merc. Sasuke got up and started joining in the fights and noticed everyone was going slower as he looked at the adults by Naruto but saw that when he looked back Neji and Lee had already finished the remaining men. Tenten after she saw Naruto fall ran toward him leaving the client and slid next to his form and applied pressure to the stab wound. Tsunade was frozen in spot still with Sakura in her arms when Jiraiya walked over and grabbed Sakura and handed her to Haku who was beside Tsunade and drawed back and slapped Tsunade across the face and said, "You're the only one who can save him, so do you job or watch another loved one die." Tsunade moved forward and knelt beside him since the pain and Jiraiya words made her forget her fear and made her hands start glowing green and started healing his body but found that her chakra was being blocked some but she forced the healing. She realized the reason her chakra was being blocked is the sword had poison on it. She said, "Kakashi, can you copy medical jutsu?" Kakashi came over to her and said, "Yeah." Tsunade said, "Copy and start using the just you I am doing so I can go and work on removing the poison." Kakashi watched her a moment and copied the jutsu and his hands started to glow blue and started healing Naruto while Tsunade stopped and started another jutsu that made her hands glow purple and black liquid started coming out of the wound. Tenten had Naruto's head in her lap crying and praying he would be okay and Sakura began to wake up in Haku's arms and she thought she was in some kind of dream. As she looked around she saw everyone gathered around Naruto and realized that it was not a dream and she tried to get up when Haku grabbed her tightly and said, "No, right now you would only be in the way. Let them help him." Sakura looked at Haku and asked, "Who are you and what's going on?" Jiraiya said, "This is Haku, him and Zabuza told us where you were and helped in rescuing you. Naruto killed 5 people to save you and then somehow he used the Yondaime Hiraishin to come back here to the bridge. I don't know what happened before we made it back but there was a dead nin along with a lot of dead mercs on the ground and Naruto had a sword in his back." Sakura tried to get free but she couldn't because Haku wrapped his arms around her and she started to cry. Tsunade after removing the poison started helping Kakashi heal Naruto. After about 10 minutes she stopped and sighed and said, "That's all we can do. It's up to him to pull through now." As she stood up, Sasuke said, "What was that just you he used earlier and who do I need to talk to learn it?" Jiraiya said, "That Judas he used was the Hiraishin and you can't learn it." Sasuke said, "Why not?" Jiraiya said, "A. It can't be copied and B. The only 2 people in the world who know how the jutsu works is Naruto and the Yondaime." Tenten said, "Please Naruto-kun, come back to me. Don't leave me. Not like this." As tears flowed down her cheeks. She then said, "It's my fault. I shouldn't have let that kunia be used. You told me to keep it for emergency and I thought that with what Kakashi said we could not win so I told him to use it. Please don't leave me. I love you." And she leaned forward and kissed him on the lips. Inside Naruto mind he appeared in front of Kyuubi cage and Naruto asked, "What the hell am I doing here?" The dark Naruto appeared and said, "You're dying. The only thing that can save you is your true power. I am not ready to die so me and you are going to fight now." And he charged Naruto so people don't get confused I will call the good Naruto by his name and call dark Naruto, Arashi. Arashi charged Naruto and Naruto ducked under a punch and Naruto ducked and punched Arashi in the ribs only to receive an elbow to the head. Naruto stumbled backwards but Arashi did a roundhouse kick which was blocked by Naruto who punched Arashi in the knee trying to break the joint but he wound up feeling his own knee got out like it was broke. Naruto and Arashi both fell to the ground and got back up but had lost their speed battle for the moment and Arashi went to punch Naruto in the stomach but it was blocked and Naruto punched Arashi in the chest and felt himself being hit there and they both fell to the ground panting for breath. Arashi said, "You might as well give up because you can never beat me. Like I told you I will always be here and always will be. Every time you hurt me you hurt yourself." Naruto stopped and looked at Arashi and cracked his knuckle and heard Arashi knuckle crack as well but his hand had not moved. Naruto said, "Hey furball, what did you call him the first time I was here?" "My doppelganger." Kyuubi said, "Yeah, what of it boy?" Naruto said, "I see. There is no way for me to defeat you for you or me. You can't defeat me either. I know get why I could not hurt you and why every time something happened to my body that it happened to your also. To defeat you I must defeat myself." And he pulled out a kunia and stabbed himself in the heart. Arashi gasped as blood spluttered out of his chest and he fell to the ground while Naruto stood there looking at him not even bleeding. Arashi started to glow green and blue and turned into pure energy that flew into Naruto whose eyes glossed over. Kyuubi said, "You may have beat your own darkness but you will never beat me." And suddenly Naruto was forced out of his mind. Outside Naruto, Tenten had just kissed Naruto when his entire body was covered with green energy that soon turned blue and his eyes started to slowly open and everyone gasped. His eyes were no longer blue but the same color green Sakura was and he said, "Is everyone alright?" in a weak voice. Sakura had jerked free of Haku when she heard Naruto and ran over and hugged him and said, "Yes. Everyone fine." Naruto smiled and said, "I am glad. I am really tired sis." And he closed his eyes and fell back to sleep. Sakura smiled and Kakashi asked, "Why did he call you sis Sakura?" Sakura froze for a moment and said, "He trusts me enough that he thinks of me as family Kakashi." Just then a bunch of merc came running to the bridge. A merc saw Gato dead and said, "They killed our meal ticket. Let's get them." And they started walking toward the group of nins being careful because they saw a lot of dead men on the ground. Jiraiya said, "I guess they found out that we broke Sakura out huh?" As he got into a fighting stance. Zabuza said, "It was not hard when you had that toad fall onto the building breaking it from its support beams." As he pulled his sword off his back. Tsunade cracked her knuckles and said, "You picked the wrong day to mess with me." Kakashi said, "I will not let you harm any of my allies." As he pulled out a kunai in each hand. Sasuke smirked still not realizing his Sharingan is active got ready like Kakashi. Neji activated his bloodline and got into the first kata stance. Lee said, "I will not let you harm any leaf shinobi or ally or I will run all the way to Suna and back 20 times without stopping. Making everyone sweat drop." Tenten said, "I will not let you harm Naruto-kun," as she grabbed Naruto's sword that was unsheathed at the moment. Haku said, "First you boss kidnaps a beautiful woman and then plans to double-cross my master. Now that he's dead you want revenge. I will grant you revenge with a swift death." Sakura seeing Naruto still out and everyone looked tired but ready to fight and what Haku said realizing he was talking about her said, "No, I will not let you harm anyone precious to me. I will not be weak." Making everyone look at her and she remember what her mom said and raised her shirt sleeve and bit her thumb and ran the blood across the number 13 and suddenly a beam of light shot out of the number and hit the water beside the bridge. A thick mist covered the bridge stopping the merc from charging anymore when the sound of something soaking wet walked onto the bridge. Kakashi asked, "What was that Sakura?" Glancing at her and then the mist waiting to see what happened. Sakura said, "A summon." As she looked at where it was. The mist started to clear and a man could be seen standing in front of the mercs and Sasuke said, "Well that's anticlimactic." In a smug voice. The man turned to look at the group of ninja and narrowed his eyes on Sasuke and he had a hockey mask on and a machete sticking out of his stomach. He pulled the machete out and started walking toward the mercs and raised his arm up and the merc stabbed the man in the heart with a spear with a glee smile on his face thinking he killed the man. The man looked at the merc and slashed his head off in one motion and walked toward the next man who tried to kill him by stabbing him in the head with a sword. The man plunged the machete into his stomach before pulling it out and going to the next one. The mercs all started to leave but when they turned around the bridge was covered with water and a sign said, "Welcome to Crystal Lake," was by the water. Everyone turned green as the man went from one to another killing the mercs brutally. Even when they worked together and cut off his arm and his head he still kept killing them as he picked up his arm and started to beat people with it, swinging it like a mace. Soon the mercs were all dead and the man picked up his head and walked into the water and was gone leaving behind the mutilated bodies of the mercs. The water receded and the bridge was just like the water never was there. Sakura ignored it and was looking at Naruto and Sasuke said, "Where did you get that summon? I demand you tell me. You don't deserve something like that." Tenten and everyone else ignored him and Tenten said, "I see what she meant by being unable to stop them. I am almost afraid to use mine." Tsunade asked, "What was those Sakura and what do you mean yours Tenten?" Sakura said, "They are a special summoning we were given by a private sensei, I have one and Tenten has the other. Let's get out of here before we have to kill anyone else." As her hands were shaking. As she walked over to pick Naruto up but Tenten said, "Stop. and raised up his wrist and wiped some blood on a seal, and soon Naruto was covered in seals and they slowly faded, and Yamato said, "That's new." "What was that?" Tenten said. "Weights." And she grabbed both her empty scrolls and bit her thumb and rubbed some blood on a seal on each one, and suddenly all the weapons on the bridge she had threw went up in smoke, and Tenten closed the scrolls. She then walked over and picked up the Hiraishin one and sighed as she looked at it. Sakura picked up his sword and sheathed it and put it on her back. Lee asked, "How much was he up to?" Tenten thought and said, "I don't know." Sasuke was fumbling and walked over to kick Naruto when he was hit on the back of the head by Jiraiya, who said, "Don't ever try it or I will kill you myself," as he bent down and picked Naruto up. Kakashi asked as they were led back toward Tazuna's house, "Okay, first thing I want to know is how Naruto know the Hiraishin." Tenten said, "The what?" with a smile on her face making everyone sweat drop. Jiraiya said, "I wonder that myself." Kakashi, who was looking at Tenten, sighed and said, "Okay, who gave you those summonings, Tenten and Sakura?" Tenten said, "Like I told you earlier, Kakashi, family secrets." Kakashi had enough and said, "Sakura, I order you to tell me." Sakura said, "Sorry, only person who knows the source besides those involved is the Hokage himself, and we are not allowed to tell under S-class penalty." Kakashi shook his head and said, "Well, can someone tell me why you and Naruto both had to be out of mission for the past week and why his eyes are now the same color as Sakura's?" Tenten said, "Sorry, family secret, though I will tell you it's equal to what happened on page 36 of Ika Ika Paradise Volume 2. As for the eyes, not a clue." Kakashi stopped and said, "You laid beside Naruto all week long. No wonder. He was out of chakra and you had blood loss." With a smile on his face and said, "But that still does not mean you can just not be available for missions." As his smile faded, Naruto groaned and said, "Kakashi, you train an average of 19 hours a day, 7 days a week without stopping for a day off, and tell me how long you last before having to shut down. Besides, what me and my girlfriend do or do not do is our business, not yours." As he had his eyes closed and being carried by Jiraiya, Kakashi asked, "Well, since you're awake, Naruto, mind telling me how you know the Hiraishin?" Naruto said, "It's amazing what you learn to do when you create 1000 Kagebunshin and turn them loose on a library, train under a weapon maker who has made a legend of himself with his own sealing knowledge, and figure out how to create your own seals." Jiraiya stopped and had set him down, though Naruto's legs were not holding him sturdy. Kakashi said, "So you recreated it?" Naruto said, "That's your decision to believe it or not. I won't confirm nor deny it." As he smiled, Naruto sighed and said, "So what's been happening while I was out, and how long was I out?" Sakura said, "I used the summon I got and it killed several more mercs." Naruto said, "That's good. Just remember the restriction on it so they don't kill you." Tenten asked, "How are you feeling? You did have a sword through you earlier." Naruto's eyes glossed over and he said, "It's not the first time, but I am fine." As his happy cherry voice was gone and replaced with an emotionalist one. Tenten sighed and handed Naruto the Hiraishin Kuniya that she picked up, and he looked at it and sighed before biting his thumb and putting the blood on it, making everyone look at him, and then he grabbed the sword Sakura handed to him and put it on the back, and he said, "It was a security seal that was added to them when they were made. If anyone tries to mess with the seals on it before my blood is on it, the kunai will explode with the power of 10 exploding tags that are in the middle of it. I don't want to take the risk someone could break down the seals and learn the secret." Everyone was stunned and Sasuke said, "Tell me how to do it." Naruto said, "Run real fast." Sasuke became pissed and was starting to do hand signs for a fire jutsu when Naruto appeared behind him with his sword drawn and held against Sasuke's neck and said, "I know you were not fixing to attack me for not giving you what you want, now were you?" Kakashi said, "That's enough, Naruto." Naruto said, "I have no problem with stopping Kakashi-sensei, but I am not going to stand by and be attacked from behind." As he sheathed his sword, Lee asked, "Naruto, how much weights did you have on?" Naruto stopped and looked at his weights and groaned and said, "No wonder I moved so fast. Here we go, Aegean." And started walking while applying chakra to it. Naruto's speed slowly started to slow down, and then Naruto stopped walking and said, "There we go. I am currently at 1500 li." Tenten slapped her forehead and said, "You did it, Aegean Naruto. You forget to multiply that by 5 since that is the weight per limb. Everyone got wide-eyed and Tsunade looked at Naruto and said, "You have 7,500 pounds on." Naruto said, "No, of course not. That's just my main weights. I also got 200 pounds on my arms and legs each to make them faster than the rest of my body added to the same activation and release seals. Like it was the weather he was talking about." Tsunade slapped her forehead and said, "He's going to kill himself. I just know it." Naruto said, "Now why would I do a thing like that, Granny?" Tenten slapped him upside the head and said, "Show some respect for Suanda-sama." Naruto said, "But she is a granny." Tenten stopped and looked at Tsunade, who had a nervous twitch, and said, "Perhaps you should call her something else." Naruto sighed and said, "Why? We got Erozanen and Granny here. I think those names fit them just like how I call the Hokage old man." Kakashi asked, "So what other skills have you been hiding, Naruto, besides the Hiraishin?" Naruto put his finger to his chin and said, "I have been learning. Well, you're my sensei, so you should already know," with a smile making everyone facefo. Sakura asked, "Why are you different, Naruto? I mean, for the last few minutes you have not had your smile on like normal unless you were happy. It's like you removed your mask." Everyone was wondering what she meant among the genin except Naruto and Tenten, and all the adults figured it out. Naruto said, "Let's just say I fought myself and won and leave it at that." Sakura said, "I see. Well, I guess then things are going to get interesting." Naruto asked, "How did you get captured, if you don't mind me asking, and where was the others?" Sakura said, "I was sent to the market to get supplies while Kakashi taught Sasuke tree climbing and Neji and Lee guarded the client. Kakashi thought that if I went without my headband out in view then I could maybe find out some info also." Haku said, "She was attacked by the 3 ninja back at the bridge and knocked out, though considering the gap as skill levels she did do pretty good to last 2 minutes against all 3. Making everyone look at him." Sakura said, "You saw that?" Haku said, "Yes. I was getting stuff to help finish healing Zabuza, and when I saw their headbands I decided to follow them and see if they were passing through or after us. I knew who they were since Zabuza showed me them in the bingo book and knew I had no chance against them, and if I used my bloodline they would have killed me regardless." Jiraiya said, "I had forgot all about you and Zabuza still being here. I figured you would have ran off already. Though everyone knew he was lying." Zabuza said, "Actually, I was wondering if it would be possible to join the Leaf. Haku and I are both tired of running and I can give you some information on 2 things you might find interesting. Does the names Orochimaru and Uchiha Itachi pique your interest?" As he walked over and leaned against a tree. Sasuke started to say something, but Tsunade put a paralyzing shot of chakra to his nervous system to both shut him up but also to stop him from doing something stupid. Jiraiya said, "I can't promise you admittance into the Leaf, but I can promise you safe passage to and from Konoha should you be denied." Zabuza said, "Fair enough. Orochimaru is the leader of the New Sound Village. He is currently gathering every missing nin that will work for him, but anyone over the rank of Junin has to have a curse seal put on them, which is why I would not work for him. He is planning something big and it's against Konoha. What it is I don't know, but the recruiter I talked to said that when it was over the Leaf would be no more. As for Itachi, I ran into him about a year ago. Him and one of the other remaining members of the 7 Swordsmen Kisame are currently members of a group called Atasuki. They came to me offering me a chance to join and said they would wait for me to decide and told me to meet them in a year in Rain Country. They said Atasuki wanted to create their own hidden village and destroy all the others with the tailed beast help. They say they have found a way to draw on the demon power and to control them. They said that if I joined I would be allowed access to the 3 tail. They also said they currently have 2 of the 9. Neji said, "Then the Uchiha is a fool. The 9 tails has been destroyed." Naruto thought, "No, it hasn't," as he sat down. Sakura thought, "Naruto," as she looked at him. Tenten walked over and sat down beside him while everyone else was quiet after what Neji said. Jiraiya said, "Well, you confirmed what I have been hearing from my spy network. We have a deal, so I will make sure you can see the Hokage and be allowed to leave if he turns you down." Naruto asked, "So what now?" Kakashi said, "We still have to stay until the bridge is finished. After that we will return to Konoha." Tsunade said, "Kakashi, I am taking Tenten and Sakura with me back to Konoha. I want to check Sakura out at a hospital, and also Tenten may have been a help in battle, but she just recently got over major blood loss from what I can tell, so she needs to be back in the village. Jiraiya said. I am taking the Gaki with me, Kakashi. I need to check him out and see why his eyes changed color and what was that green chakra. I assume you can finish the mission now with the main threat and the enemy Nin's dead. Kakashi nodded and Yamato said, I guess I will head back with them and to escort Zabuza and Haku. Kakashi said, so you just going to leave us hanging? As he pulled out his book. Tenten asked, which volume is that? Kakashi said, 18, why? Tenten said, oh, I was hoping 19 was out. Jiraiya pulled out a copy and handed it to her, making her squeal, and Kakashi asked, where's mine? Jiraiya said, you need to pay more attention to your students before you get another free one. Tsunade had a vain twitch and said, I need to have a talk with her. Naruto said, no, she's fine just the way she is. As he got up and walked over to Jiraiya. Jiraiya bit his thumb and ran through some seals, and Gambunta appeared, and Jiraiya said, I need you to take us back to the mainland, Aegean Gambunta. Gambunta said, if you call me out one more time besides a fight or to drink, I will sit on you, Jiraiya. As Tsunade, Yamada, Zabuza, Haku, Sakura, Tenten, and Naruto jumped up to join Jiraiya before Gambunta jumped away. When they made it to the mainland and Gambunta went up in smoke, Naruto said, something's wrong with my chakra. It feels different now. I didn't want to say anything back around the others, especially with Kakashi 20 questions and Sasuke being pissed that someone does something that he can't. He's been getting worse every time me and Sakura do something new, like tree climbing, water walking, leaf balancing, while doing both, as well as her weapon skills increasing thanks to Tenten's help. Yamato walked over and said, flare your chakra. It was flooded with nature chakra back on the bridge. Jiraiya asked, what's nature chakra, Yamato? Yamato said, it's what we call Naruto green chakra. We learned that if he sent out his chakra around plants, that he can absorb their energy, and that it also neutralizes his other chakra in his body, making them his normal blue. Naruto flared his chakra and it was completely green. No red or blue, but completely green. Yamato asked, did anything happen with it? Zabuza said, if you're all talking about the Kyuubi, I already figured it out, and so has Haku. Kisame and Itachi told me all about their target they were assigned, so if I ever encountered him, to leave him alone. Blonde hair, blue eyes, whiskers on his face, named Naruto. They will have to update their info. Jiraiya looked at Zabuza and said, so they're the ones assigned to get him. Naruto said, I guess everyone knows about Kyuubi. I never told anyone, but the night I got the scroll I met it and someone who looked like me. He said he was my doppelganger and was all my dark thoughts. He also said he had my true power and that the only way I would ever get it is if I killed him, but he said that if I fought him and lose, he would get control of my body and let it free for revenge. On the bridge when I passed out, I fought him because he made a play for me, since he said I was dying. Every time I hurt him, it hurt me, and vice versa, and after I realized it and remembered what I read about doppelgangers, I stabbed myself in the heart and killed him. He turned into chakra and slammed into me, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up. Tsunade said, Naruto, do you still have any of those seeds you had earlier? Naruto reached into a pocket and pulled one out, and Tsunade asked, have you been able to do anything other than just grow flowers before now? Naruto said, I can use 4 jutsu, but I can't make the plants do what I want them to, like Yamato said I should be able to do. Tsunade said, I think I know what has happened, but I want to test my theory. Try to make the seed grow, but imagine what you want it to do as you do it. Naruto said, sure, but I don't know why. It never worked before. And sent out his chakra into the seed and it grew quickly into a long vine, and Naruto said, whoa, it worked. As he swung the vine and it circled a tree and tied itself around it. He then sent a little chakra into it and it unrolled and came back to him in a loose rope. Naruto said, that's weird. It seems that it will do it on its own like I want it to when I put my chakra into it. Tsunade smiled and said, now you have unlocked your true bloodline, Naruto. You should be able to make them do pretty much anything, but I will tell you the one thing my grandfather said about his bloodline that I remember. You can't make a plant do anything that it won't want. The plant is alive also, so learn what each kind of plant will or won't do. Naruto nods and asked, "What should I do about this?" Holding up the vine. Tsunade said, "Either practice with it some more or destroy it so no one can use it." Naruto nods and threw it into the air and went through 3 hand signs and said, "Windcutter." And suddenly the vine was destroyed into 10 pieces. Jiraiya asked, "How did you do that?" Naruto scratched the back of his head and said, "Asuma sensei has been teaching me wind manipulation as well as a few wind jutsu. That was one I modified for use with a trench knife. I would have worked with the vine but I don't want to do it while moving and in the company of others so no one gets hurt." Everyone nods and Tsunade asked, "How do you feel, Sakura? Did they do anything to you while you were captured?" Sakura said, "Besides hit me with that stick and tell me that the moment I passed out I would be used like any woman should be since I won't be able to fight back. Besides that, no. I stayed awake all that time from the moment I first woke up to when Naruto and Haku saved me. After I passed out I rested a little but I am still tired." As she looked away. Naruto was clenching his fist and said, "I am glad I killed those men then." Jiraiya asked, "How are you both taking that? As far as I know you both never killed before." Naruto said, "I was upset at first and it brought a lot of bad memories but when I heard Sakura scream I forgot it and moved to help her. When I found that man hurting her I was about to kill him when Haku killed him with a senbon to the heart." As he was still clenching and unclenching his fist. Sakura said, "I saw those men and I knew I would not be much help and with Naruto out I knew we both were going to be a liability along with Tazuna so I decided to use that summon. Since I was told it don't use any chakra but it has special restrictions." Tsunade asked, "What kind of summons use no chakra and what kind of restrictions?" Sakura looked at Tenten who nodded and said, "Mine has to be used by water and is used to take out a lot of enemies at a distance but it can only be used up to a point in life which I won't mention." Tenten said, "Mine is a close range one that has to be used inside a building and can't be used after the same point as Sakura's." Jiraiya asked, "Why did you do that, Naruto? The whole damsel in distress bit and how did you know it would work?" Naruto said, "I was told the idea from a friend. I guess you could say around my birthday last year and as for me turning into a girl it was my sexy no jutsu. A jutsu I made." Yamato said, "I hate to bring this up but we should be getting back to Konoha." As he glanced at Zabuza and Haku. Jiraiya said, "Sure, let's head back." As he turned and started to walk and Naruto said, "Why can't you just summon Gambunta Aegean?" Jiraiya said, "You heard what he said, if I call him Aegean to be just a taxi then he will sit on me." Naruto nods and walks beside him and saw Tenten reading the book Jiraiya gave her and asked, "So how is it, Tenten?" Tenten said, "It seems to be good but it won't beat my favorite one though." Jiraiya asked, "Really? What's your favorite?" Tenten said, 16. You know, the one where the poor guy who lived on the streets after his home was destroyed met the red-eyed princess and her traveling companion at the hot springs when he was running from a mob. The princess said he looked like he was the dead king from another kingdom who she had a crush on and her companion who had the slit tongue kept calling him the names the mob called him like it was a badge of honor. It turned out he was the prince of another kingdom whose father slayed the evil dragon at the cost of his life. That's my favorite one." Naruto stopped and asked, "Tenten, what did the male character of that story look like and how did it end?" As he was pale. Tenten stopped and said, "He had blonde hair and blue eyes and it ended when the princess told him happy birthday and she would hope he would become king like the man he looked like." Naruto turned to Jiraiya and screamed, "You knew!" and disappeared and reappeared in front of Jiraiya with his sword out and sliced through Jiraiya only for him to be replaced by a log and he tensed and replaced himself as the log shot out vines from it shooting through the place he was a moment ago grabbing onto Jiraiya who melted into a pile of mud. Naruto reappeared in the road and said, "You knew who my father was all the time and you never did a damn thing about it, you bastard." And disappeared Aegean as he saw Jiraiya standing in a tree and slashed the tree branch Jiraiya was on. Tenten screamed, "What's wrong, Naruto-kun? Why are you attacking Jiraiya-sama?" As she was scared. Tsunade, who had already figured it out, was more impressed with the fight she was seeing as Naruto was using his bloodline without even trying. Every time Jiraiya appeared, Naruto either appeared there or some tree or plant would hit him. She went through some hand seals and replaced a log with Naruto's sword as she held it as he glanced at her and said, "You can beat the shit out of him but you are not killing him until I find out why also." Sakura asked. What's going on, Tsunade? Tsunade said. Think about what Tenten's favorite story of Jiraiya book was about. A poor boy living on the street being chased by a mob. Also include the fact that the woman wished him a happy birthday, meaning that if it was say October 10th, the blonde hair blue eye guy would be Naruto, added to the fact that he was the son of the king, or should I say Hokage, who died fighting the dragon, or Kyuubi. Yamato said. Then there is the reference to the red-eyed woman and her slit-tongued companion. There is only one red-eyed woman in Konoha, and that would be Kurenai, and she does have a slit-tongued traveling companion, or rather her best friend is Anko, who was the apprentice to Orochimaru the snake Sannin, and everyone knows snakes have slit tongues. Like almost everyone else, those two get plastered on that day, and if you know Anko, when she gets drunk she finds someone to sleep with, and if the princess or Kurenai did have a crush on the Yondaime like your story said, she may have been too drunk to realize that Naruto wasn't him. If I had to guess what happened, I say they gave Naruto a birthday to remember. Ouch, that's going to hurt. Everyone glanced back at the battle still going on. Jiraiya appeared back where the fight had started after having a tree limb slap him in the head, and the vines shot up Aegean and encased him, preventing him from moving. Naruto appeared and kicked him into the air and created 20 Kajbunshin that all started bouncing off of trees as they landed and made a human pinball out of him. Haku asked. Is Naruto actually beating a Sannin? Tsunade said. No, Jiraiya letting him vent all his frustration out because he knew Naruto is right. Whatever happens, no one interfere. If it gets deadly, I will stop it myself. Naruto appeared above Jiraiya and kicked him with both feet, sending him to the ground, creating a crater. Naruto landed near him and walked up and said, give me one reason why. Your story told that you knew I was Dad's son, add to the fact you knew he was married since you were at the wedding. That meant you knew all about Mom and Sis. Why did you not help me? I heard the old man talk about you and the other Sannins all the time when I was younger, and he got joy out of telling me how you and the Yondaime were like father and son, so why did you leave me in that hell hole instead of taking me as at least your unofficial grandson or something? You can't say that you did not know what my life was like, because your story said how I was homeless because my house was destroyed. Yeah, it was destroyed. They planted a bomb in it with 200 exploding tags all lined up, so when I opened the door I would be killed. Luckily they did not realize the old man reinforced the door with steel that blocked the blast. I spent nearly a week in the hospital after that, where the only time anyone came into the room besides the old man was to change out the medicine, or should I say poison, in the IV. They could claim it was medicine, but when you pulled the label off and it says acid or has the big bone and crossbones like most poisons are labeled, you know what it really is. Luckily they left me one bedpan that they never bothered to check, since I did not deserve to be clean, and I was able to block the IV until they leave and have it drain in the bedpan. Then there is the food that they claim would make me better faster. I placed it on the window sill to see what would happen, and a bird ate it and was dead in 5 seconds. You got one chance to tell me why the hell you did not do anything for me, or I will kill you. What was your reason? Was it because I was a painful reminder of Dad, or was it that you are like almost everyone else in Konoha and see me as the Kyuubi, or perhaps it's just you don't give a shit about anyone unless they have tits and a. Naruto changed into his female form and said in a female voice, so if I looked like this, would you have done something? And released it as he kicked Jiraiya in the stomach, sending him into a tree. Everyone was stunned by what they heard happen to him. Sakura knew it was bad, but even she did not know it was that bad. Tenten was crying and Jiraiya said, the council. Making everyone look at him. Naruto asked with narrowed eyes, what was that? Jiraiya said, the only way Sensei could get the council to approve the law that no one was to speak about the Kyuubi and you under penalty of death was if you were forbidden from leaving the village until you became of age. They feared that if you were taken to another village they could make you into a weapon to be used against Konoha, so they made Sensei agree that if you ever left the village before you came of age, then they would activate a seal they placed on you while you were still an infant, and it would fry your brain and blow up your heart. I could not take you out of the village because they would kill you. That's why I sent a percentage of my book sales to Sensei to not only help take care of you by paying for your apartment and what little bit of free money you had plus your utilities, but also to pay your mother's and sister's taxes, as well as make sure they had enough money to live on. A librarian in Konoha only makes $6,000 a year. Your mother and sister lived on $14,000 a year. I know your life was bad. I seen the report and I wanted to do everything I could to take care of you, but my hands were tied. I had to leave the village because I was afraid I would kill them all. I also knew that Danzo had already made arrangements for you to be kidnapped so they could kill you, so I spent a lot of time blocking all outside threats to you. Tsunade said. You knew this and you did not tell me. Jiraiya said. What was I supposed to tell you? I did not even know you were his mother until a month and a half ago. Naruto asked. Are those seals still on me? Jiraiya sighed and said. No, the day I saw you and those ladies in the hot springs was the day I removed them. That's what I was in Konoha for. After you all passed out, I used Shushin to take you away and removed the seal. I started to take you then, but I knew I could not protect you from Atsuki. We have been trying to gather info on them for the last 3 years since Orochimaru and Itachi both were members of the group, but Orochimaru left. The only thing we knew for sure was they were after the tailed beast, so that meant they would be coming after you. Zabuza said. That's why I wanted to kill the Mizukage. People get so involved in politics they forget the people are human. It's also why I killed the entire graduating class that year in Mist. As he leaned against the tree. Naruto sighed and said. I won't kill you, Jiraiya, but I am not completely trusting you either. I need to think on it, and I know this is a clone. Look behind you and you will see what I mean. As he looked at a tree branch behind him where the real Jiraiya was, as the one in front of him melted. Jiraiya turned and paled, as behind him was over 200 bamboo poles made into spikes all ready to impale him. Everyone looked where he was looking and paled also. Yamato asked. How did you do that, Naruto? I know you dropped you weights to move like you did, but how did you get your bloodline to work like that? Naruto said. It was like me and the plants became one. It was like I could see and feel what they did and vice versa. I just had to think trap him and a wall appeared, and when I thought capture him and the vines would try and grab him. It was like they played off my emotions and did as I wanted them to, or maybe I was fighting the way they wanted me to. I can't really explain it. Zabuza said. Kid, you use the Ying double dragon style of sword fighting, don't you? Naruto said. Yeah, how did you know? Zabuza said. You need to learn another style if you plan to fight Kisame at any time. He uses the Yang double dragon style, so he will be able to neutralize all you sword skills since it's the sister style you have. That means you will come down to jutsu and experience, and since there's no way you can gain 10 years of battle experience before you meet him, you need more skills. Naruto sighed and looked down, and Zabuza said, don't be too hard on yourself, kid. You could give most Junins a run for their money right now from what I saw. Hell, you could probably take on a cage for a little while before you lost, but you lack battle experience. Naruto sighed and said, then I am still not strong enough. I need to get Kage level. As he turned and started to walk toward Konoha. Tenten walked up beside him and grabbed his hand and started walking with him, followed by Sakura, who was looking down until she felt someone put an arm around her and she looked up and saw it was Haku, who said, don't be sad. You did real good back in Wave also. You're about Chunin right now, I would say. Making her blush. She asked, why are you being nice to me? Haku said, I don't know. For some reason I like you and want to get to know you better. Sakura blushed and said, I would like that. As they started to chat. Yamada and Zabuza followed behind the two couples, and Yamato said, young love. Zabuza said, God, I hope he does not make me a grandfather. As they were walking away, Tsunade stopped and said, you can come out now, Jiraiya. The Jiraiya in the tree melted into mud and Jiraiya busted out of the ground. He walked over to her and said, the boy's good. Tsunade said, I know. He had your dead to rights most of the fight, even if you were not using any skills but to dodge. How bad was it? As they both started to walk behind the others. Jiraiya reached into his pocket and pulled out a scroll and handed it to her, and she opened it and read. She narrowed her eyes and said, what are we going to do about it? Jiraiya said, the boy is the main problem. When word gets out he knows the Hiraishin, it is going to be like a pack of lions fighting for a lamb. Sakura we could keep hidden. Kushina we don't really have to worry about. Tsunade asked. Why's that? Jiraiya snorted and asked. What rank do you think she had? Tsunade said. High Chunin to low Junin. Why? Jiraiya smiled and said. Do you remember a ninja about 17 years ago called the Hungry Piranha? Tsunade stopped and said. I remember hearing about that person. Apparently every ninja who faced him was left dead in a bloody mess and was always soaked. I heard he was made Cage of the village of Whirlpool. Jiraiya said. Yeah, she was. As he waited for Tsunade to catch on. Tsunade took a few steps and stopped and asked. You don't mean to tell me that she is that ninja? Jiraiya said. Yeah, she is. Whirlpool does things different. The Rasenkage, Spiral Shadow, is only in office for 10 years. Like you, she is a descendant of a previous Cage. She was the Kyudaime Rasenkage before her time was up. She took office at 17 and left when she was 27, met Minota at 28 and had the kids at 29. She may be 41 now, but she still keeps up her skills. 3 years after she left Whirlpool, its hidden village was destroyed by Iwa, so no one really knew much about her. Apparently her grandfather was the Sandaime Rasenkage. Sensei told me she told the kids she was only a Junin. Tsunade said. So those two have 5 cages and 2 Sanins in their blood, plus the fact that Naruto has the Shodaime's bloodline as well as the fox. Jiraiya said. Don't forget Sakura also has a potential bloodline in perfect chakra control like you. Sensei thinks that like you, no matter how much chakra you have, it's always perfect. He also thinks she might have the Nadaime's bloodline also because her elemental card, instead of being just a little wet, was completely soaked. So much that he wrung out 6 glasses of water out of the card before it could be considered damp. She just needs someone to teach her sweeten jutsu. Tsunade asked. What's Kakashi been teaching her in Naruto? Jiraiya sighed as they kept a good distance behind the others and said. Apparently Kakashi was ordered to primarily teach the Uchiha and has currently taught them nothing. Yamato taught Naruto how to use his bloodline, the secret of Kagebunshin, and when you can make over 1,000 at a time and not be tired, it comes in handy. Sensei said he read the entire Konoha library in less than a week. He also knows tree climbing that he taught Sakura, leaf balancing. Kushina told Sakura how to water walk but had her work on endurance with Naruto before she was allowed to do it, so they both can do that now. Naruto, as you heard, has also been learning wind manipulation from Asuma. I am thinking about teaching him the Rasengan. Naruto has also had Kenjutsu from Dustin, or as you might have heard his name, the Dragon Slayer. Tsunade stopped and said, how the hell did Naruto get him to agree to teach him? The Dragon Slayer was at one time considered one of the top 5 swordsmen in the world until he got hurt. He was the second best in the village under Hayate. Jiraiya pointed to Tenten and said, that's his daughter and the best weapon user in the village at long range. Apparently she can hit any target up to a mile away with 100% accuracy. Her chakra control is near perfect and her stamina is also good. Her ninjutsu sucks since she has spent most of her time perfecting her skills with weapons. She is also pretty good with the sword but does not like them. Her sensei is Guy along with the Hyuga and the boy in green back there in wave. From what Sensei told me, Dustin was also Minota chief maker of the Hiraishin Kuniyas, so I think he's the one who taught it to Naruto. Tsunade nods and said, that is interesting. How's her Tiahutsu? Jiraiya frowned and said, all 3 of them suck at it. Naruto Kenjutsu makes up for his some, but he still has a lot of openings, and from what I saw of his use of Hiraishin, he just recently learned it since he has not had much experience using it, or he would have not made that mistake at the end of the battle on the bridge. I think that's why they were unable to be with their teams this past week. Tsunade nods and said, so we have a super powerhouse who could be a Junin with a rare bloodline, a Chunin level nin with 2 possible bloodline and perhaps the makings of a medic nin, and lastly we have a weapons expert who also has the makings of a medic nin. Jiraiya smirked and said, they could be the next Sanins. Suan shook her head and said, don't get me started. Naruto was walking beside Tenten and she asked, so you want to talk about it? Naruto looked at her and asked, talk about what? Tenten said, well, either we can talk about what happened back there or the fact that you basically admitted that you and 2 Junins had together. Naruto groaned and said, I am not ready to talk about what happened back there, but I guess I can tell you about the other, but you can't tell anyone. Sakura said, then let me get up there also. I want to hear this. As she walked up holding Haku's hand, which Naruto raised an eyebrow and said, you hurt my sister, I will do to you what I did to the pervert. Sakura punched him in the arm and said, quit threatening Haku. Now spill it. Naruto sighed and said, it happened last year on my birthday. Flashback. Naruto was running from a mob and the ABNU mysteriously disappeared Aegean this year. They had tracked him down just outside of the ramen stand and blocked off all roof and roads leading toward his apartment in the Hokage Tower. They planned ahead this time. Naruto soon made it toward the hot springs and saw that the door to the woman's side was open and she heard two women giggling inside, so he went to put on a hinge in haste and screwed up the hand seals and created the sexy "No Just You." He appeared as a female and he quickly ran inside and closed the door hard. Luckily the people in the mob were far enough behind they did not see him hinge, but they did see him run inside. A female voice said, "What's wrong with you, cutie? You act like you're about to be killed." Naruto turned and luckily was too scared to react to the sight of Kurenai and Anko in the water, each holding a glass that had some sake in it. Naruto said in a female voice, "I am trying to get away from some people who want to hurt me. Can you help me?" Just then a shout from the other side of the door screamed, "The demon ran into the bathhouse. Let's get him." And people started to beat on the door. Anko said, "Jump in the water and hold your breath, kid. I will sit on your shoulders and Kurenai here will cast a genjutsu to make it where they can't see you." Naruto, not wasting a moment, jumped in the water and grabbed as much air as he could. Anko immediately sat down on his shoulders and Kurenai, even though she was drunk, could still cast a genjutsu. Just as she finished, the door busted open and a group of about 20 men and 3 women charged in and Anko screamed, "What the hell are you assholes doing? Can't you see we are in here?" And she sent out snakes to attack the group, who quickly ran to get away. Kurenai got up and went to close the door and Anko sighed before she felt something between her legs and jumped out of the water. Naruto slowly started to float to the top of the water and Anko realized that he was drowning, so she scooped him up out of the water and Kurenai came over and between them started to do CPR on him. Anko had ripped his shirt off to do the stomach part while Kurenai did them mouth to mouth. They both knew who he was because when he passed out the jutsu stopped. A few moments later Naruto coughed and spit out the water and he slowly opened his eyes. Kurenai looked at him and the alcohol must have taken over because she saw the yondaime and leaned forward and started to kiss him. Naruto's eyes opened wide and then as her tongue found its way into his he closed his eyes and tried returning the kiss. Anko looked at her friend and said, "What the hell? I always wonder what it was like to a demon. I guess you're as close as I am going to get." And she undid his pants and pulled them off and slid on top of him. Naruto's eyes opened wide at the sensation and Kurenai broke the kiss and said, "Oh Yondaime-sama. I can't believe you're back. My childhood crush has returned to me." And she leaned forward and kissed him. Aegean. End flashback. Naruto said. And then things went from there. By the time they were too tired to stop, it was already close to midnight and they both laid on my arms there on the ground by the hot springs, and the last thing I heard was "Happy birthday, Gaki." Everyone had stopped when he was talking about it and Tenten was gaping while Sakura was beet red. A perverted giggle was heard and everyone turned and saw all the adults had caught up with them and Tsunade said, "I am going to kill them." Naruto said, "No you're not. It was a one-time thing and though I admit it was not what I wanted at first, I enjoyed it and wound up not ending up in the hospital on my birthday. They saved my life that day and I won't have them hurt because of it. Besides they were both drunk." As he looked at her. Tsunade said, "But they." Naruto said, "Drop it. I know what you're thinking, but nothing you could say or do would change the events and I rather leave them alone." As he turned back and walked toward Konoha. Tenten asked, "So about what time did you get to the hot springs?" Curiosity getting the better of her. Naruto said, "Around noon." "Why?" Everyone stopped and looked at him and Tenten fainted. Naruto asked, "Why did she faint?" As he picked her up bridal style. Tsunade had her mouth open and said, "Over 11 hours. Jiraiya said, 11.5 from kiss to kiss." As he remembered the research. Sakura looked at Tenten and said, "Damn, lucky. If I wasn't his sister." Naruto asked, "What's wrong with you all?" "It's no big deal." Tsunade asked. "Naruto, how much do you know about other people?" Naruto said, "Nothing really." "Why?" She slapped her forehead and said, "Kid, most men only go at most 4 hours without a break. For you to please not one but 2 women for that long makes you a rare gem in. Women like it longer as long as it does not get too rough later on when they get dry." Naruto scratched his head and said, "Well, then I am normal I guess." I just used my tongue on one while the other bounced. Anko told me what to do and I like it once I got the hang of it. I also used my fingers and hands after being told how to make them feel good. Still not getting what's the big deal. Sakura blew back with a nosebleed passing out. Brother or not, that was too much information. Tsunade slapped herself Aegean and said, I can't say it. Let's just go. Haku picked up Sakura and joined the group as they made their way to Konoha. Back in Wave Country everyone was sitting at the dinner table and Inari said, Man, I wish I could have been there. I would like to have seen the golden green flash guy. Kakashi asked, Why did you call him that? Inari said, Well, you said how he attacked Gato's men with golden flashes and then he turned green with some weird energy, so I thought just call him the golden green flash. Tazana said, You know that might not be a bad name for the bridge, the Golden Green Flash Bridge named after the kid who showed up and saved all our asses. Neji asked, About that, I was wondering. Does Naruto have a bloodline? Kakashi said, Not that I know of. Why? Neji said, Oh, it nothing, just curious. And thought, when he was walking earlier and he appeared behind the Uchiha, the ground suddenly sprang grass up and it looked like it was following his control. Sasuke asked, How is the Dobi so strong? Lee said, Because his flames of youth burn brightly and he shows hard work pays off. Kakashi sighed and said, I hate to admit it, Sasuke, but Lee's right. Naruto has been training every day harder than everyone. The only time he ever stops training is when he's eating. I notice that he uses his Kajbunshin to practice chakra control while he's busy working on the missions, as well as the fact that he's also been learning swordsmanship and who knows what else he's been learning. Neji said, I know he's works at the Wolf Claw weapon shop an hour every day in the forge before lessons. Tenten told me once. Apparently it's how he is paying for the training her dad is giving him for sword training. Lee said, Don't forget about the weight training. I am surprised he is at the same level as I am on them and we are both almost to Gai Sensei's level. Sasuke said, The Dobi should not be getting extra training. I should be the one. Kakashi had enough of Sasuke attitude, and seeing Naruto using his sensei jutsu made Kakashi realize that he has been a terrible burden to both his other students, as he remembered his saying, Those who follows the rules are trash, but those who abandon their friends are worse than trash. Sasuke proved before Naruto arrived he cared nothing for his teammates and it is only getting worse. He said, Sasuke, I have almost had it with you. You're upset because both him and Sakura are getting better. If you would get off your and train with them when they asked you to, you could be at the same level they are, so you only have yourself to blame. The reason I have not taught you or them anything else besides teamwork is because you are weaker than they are and have been holding them back. You don't like what I am saying, then you go and find somebody else to teach you. As he looked back at his book, Sasuke smirked and said, Well, you're of no use to me anymore anyways. I awakened my Sharingan and copied that jutsu you used on the bridge, and walked out the door slamming it behind him. Kakashi sighed and said, Lee, Neji, I can't believe I am saying this, but don't show any of your skills around him. His arrogance is to the point he will get somebody killed. I know you only can use Taijutsu, Lee, and I don't want guy screaming at me that I allowed Sasuke to steal your style, though if he copied the Chidori he might have copied part of your style also, so don't use it for the remainder of the time we're here. You also, Neji. Even though he can't see the chakra holes, he can read where they are. Both nods and Lee asked, So how much longer should we be here? Kakashi said, I figure by the end of the week. At that time I am going to ask the Hokage to replace Sasuke on my team. Neji asked, Does that mean you're not putting them in the Chunin exams? Kakashi said, Sakura and Naruto are both Chunin level. They have both been training hard and I believe Jiraiya will take Naruto as his apprentice and Tsunade may take Sakura. I am going to ask her to at least. She has what it takes to be a good one. If they do as I hope, they will, both Naruto and Sakura can enter as individuals in the exams, though it would be harder, but they would most likely team up together and possibly another team. Perhaps yours are one of the others. Lee asked, What about Sasuke? Kakashi said, He stole my only original jutsu and that is all I am giving him. I refuse to teach him anything else. As he went back to his book, Kakashi thought back to what happened on the bridge and thought, he looked just like Sensei. I got the feeling I was lied to and I don't like being lied to. When the group of Sanins and company arrived at Konoha, they immediately went to the Hokage. As they entered, Tsunade had already sent Jiraiya to get Kushina, and when she arrived she immediately hugged Naruto, Sakura and Tenten, seeing that they were all safe. The third said, "So tell me who our two guests are and what happened." Sakura said, "This is Zabuza and Haku. They were hired by Gato to kill the client. Gato double-crossed them and had some missed nins kidnap me. Zabuza and Haku made a deal and told where I was. Naruto and Haku saved me. Naruto then used Hiraishin and got back to the bridge to save the others, though he nearly died from a sword wound." Jiraiya then went into detail about what happened, along with the fact Naruto and Sakura killed. Tenten had already killed before with her team Sashi over that. They then told about Naruto green chakra along with Sasuke behavior. Tsunade said, "The deal was Zabuza and Haku want to join the Leaf and have also given us information on Orochimaru and Itachi. Orochimaru is the cage of the Sound Village and he's recruiting missing nin and giving them curse seals. Itachi and Kisame are assigned to capture Naruto for Atsuki. Naruto fully awakened his bloodline and can now control plants with thought." The third said, "I can allow you to stay in Konoha under watch for 1 year probation, but you will need a sponsor before I can let you join to be a ninja." Tsunade said, "I have a proposition for everyone here." The third looked at her and she said, "I am willing to be both Zabuza and Haku sponsor in return that they agree to be official bodyguards of the Namikaze clan. That includes all lands and secrets of the clan as well as the two heirs which they will agree to help train as well as the hungry piranha. In return they get citizenship as well as a place to stay in the Namikaze mansion as well as $3,000 a month payment for their guard duties." Naruto asked, "Who's the hungry piranha?" Zabuza said, "The former cage of Whirlpool. He was said to have killed nearly 2,000 men during the war. I never thought I would meet him. The Mizukage order all missed nins to kill him since he used a water jutsu that destroyed all of their best jutsu." Kushina leaned against the wall and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you and I am surprised people still remember me being called that. Shocking almost everyone in the room." Naruto said, "Wait, you were a cage. I thought you said you were a Junin." Kushina sighed and said, "Whirlpool only lets someone be the Rasenkage for 10 years before they step down. After that I went back to being a Junin. It is their way to make sure if a cage is killed or dies they have at least one in training and one who is already trained to be able to take over. Konoha used the Sanins for the same thing from what I was told. If you want to know the truth, counting me and your father, you both are the kids of 5 cages and 2 Sanins." Tenten said, "No wonder you have so much strength." Still somewhat floored by what happened earlier. The third said, "And who will be the clan head of the Namikaze clan?" Tsunade sighed and said, "I will, and I will marry Jiraiya, though the old pervert is not getting any more, so that way he will also be if I am not available, and to also let everyone know that the kids are under out protection to help put the council in its place." Kushina asked, "Exactly are you going to pay them, Tsunade? As far as I know you're in department up to your eyes." Jiraiya said, "I got more than enough money from my book sales to pay off all of Tsunade debts as well as make our clan fairly rich." Zabuza asked, "So what will mine and Haku official place be if we take this offer?" Tsunade said, "You will be Leaf Shinobi, but your first priority is to the clan in which every member is in this office right now." Naruto sighed and said, "So does this mean that me and Sakura can finally tell everyone we're related?" The third said, "Actually, I have a suggestion." Making everyone look at him. Naruto said, "Why do I got the feeling I am going to dress drag and do the hula?" "Just kidding," he said, "why do I feel I am not going to like this?" The third smiled and said, "How good are you at using the Hiraishin, Naruto?" Naruto said, "It's no big deal if you know the secret." "Why?" The third said, "I want Naruto to be Jiraiya apprentice and Sakura to be Tsunade's until the exams in 4 months. During that time I want to let everyone know the Yellow Flash has returned by doing several unique missions." Kushina said, "You're not actually planning to put my son out there in the world to make him the biggest target alive?" The third said, "Based on what you all saw of Naruto's skills on this mission, how does he rank overall?" Zabuza said, "Kenjutsu is good, probably about Chunin, but he needs combat experience." Jiraiya said, "His Tiahutsu needs a lot of work. He has no style at all." Tsunade said, "His speed is Junin level, not including the Hiraishin." Yamato said. His bloodline has increased nearly 100% over where it was. He is somewhat skilled in wind manipulation. The third nods and said, then I believe my plan would be what we should do. That way, if his name is known in the world, the council will not be able to hurt him anymore, and the people of the village won't be able to hate him without making all the other nations look down on us. I am willing to let Naruto use his name for now, but not Sakura. I want he to be listed as Tsunade's apprentice until the exams, at which time she can use it, because I believe she has the Nadime's bloodline. Sakura said. What? The third said. Zabuza, would you mind showing Sakura a simple water jutsu real quick? Zabuza said. Sure, though she needs to be near water. As he showed her the signs for Mazubunshin. Sakura memorized the 2 seals and tried them and said, Mazubunshin. And suddenly 2 water clones appeared. Everyone was wide-eyed, and the third said, I was right. You can pull water out of the air like the Nadime could. Zabuza said. I think I am going to accept the offer. It just got a lot more interesting, and besides, I think my adopted son here has a chance to be happy. As he looked at Sakura and Haku. Naruto sighed and said, but what about my training and my girlfriend? The third said, simple, I will give Jiraiya a scroll with jutsu for you and he will teach you between missions. I am also awarding you an A- rank pay for the mission you did. As for Tenten, she is a member of Guy's team, but she can train with Suand if she would let her. Haku asked, so if we are ninja of this village, what rank will we be? The third said, I believe Zabuza will be granted special Junin and you will unfortunately be a genin because you have never been an actual ninja, but I will put you with Sakura and Naruto when he returns as a team. Naruto asked, what about the bastard Sasuke? The third sighed and said, he will stay with Kakashi and I will put him with another team. Naruto nods and said, so how long do I have before I have to leave with the pervert? As he looked at Jiraiya. Jiraiya asked, why can't you call me grandpa? Naruto said, not after you put me in your book. If I find out you did it Aegean or put tension in them, I won't stop the bamboo next time. The third asked, what are you two talking about? Tenten said, Jiraiya put Narutokan in one of his books with 2 Junins of this village and Naruto kicked his. Kushina cracked her knuckles and said, first you put me and Minota in your book and now you put my. Wait, what 2 Junins? As she looked at Naruto. The door to the office opened and Team 8 walked in and Kurenai said, I am sorry for interrupting Hokage-sama, but we caught Tora and I thought we should deliver her before Kiba killed her. As she held up the cage with the cat. Sakura turned beet red and looked away from Kurenai, who raised an eyebrow and said, I think this was a bad time to be here. We will be on our way, Hokage-sama. And she ushered her student out real quick since she recognized 2 Sanins and an A- rank missing nin in the office. Kushina saw Sakura reaction and said, don't tell me that she was one of them. Naruto said, Mom, drop it. Now are you going to answer my question? When are we leaving? The third said, tomorrow at sunrise. Naruto nods and said, can I get my pay then? I got some stuff I need to get before I leave. The third nods and writes a pay voucher and hands it to him, and Naruto said, Tension, I got a few things I need to get. If you don't mind, can I pick you up around 5 this evening to have dinner? Tenten said, sure Naruto-kun. Naruto smiles and leaves the office, and Sakura said, okay, this is freaking me out. Ever since he merged with his other personality, he is different. The third sighed and said, so the seal Inoichi put on him broke, huh? Sakura nods. Tenten said, if there's nothing else you need us for, I need to talk to Sakura about something. The third nods and said, sure, go ahead. I can't think of anything else I need you for. Both girls nod and leave, but not before Sakura looks at Haku one last time. When they were gone, the third said, Yamato, if you don't mind, can you take Zabuza and Haku down to registration and get them set up? Put them down as sponsored by the Namikaze clan and put down all skills they possess as secrets of the Namikaze clan. The others will join them shortly. After that you will have the rest of the week off before returning to your normal duties. Yamato said, thank you Hokage-sama. And left with Zabuza and Haku. Once they were gone, the third said, what the hell were you all doing talking in the open of 2 possible enemies about everything? Do you know what could happen if they were enemies? Jiraiya said, They already knew about the Kyuubi from Itachi, and the fact Naruto used his father's jutsu made anyone who sees him do a double take. There is no denying it any longer. I would not be surprised if Kakashi asked you. The third sighed and Kushina said, so what's the real reason you want to get Naruto and Sakura out in the open like that, and don't say the council? The third reached into a stack of scrolls and pulled one out and said, this arrived today, and handed it to them. Jiraiya said, the Hidden Sound Village wishes to participate in the Chunin exams and the Fire Lord already approved it. The third said, what better time to attack? We will have security stretched so thin that nothing we could do really to stop an invading force without some casualties. Jiraiya said, so you are wanting to use Naruto and Sakura to level the field, huh? The third said, no, Orochimaru would not send a team here so blatantly unless he has a secret weapon or an alternative motive. I figure he also will have spies in the village to alert him if we find out he's the cage there. I figure if I can get Sakura up and battle ready before then and Naruto as well, then I am hoping Naruto will be a moral booster for our nins like his father was, and Sakura being an unknown would make it where she could trump things for us. I want all skills on both labeled clan secrets and no one is to know what they know. I want the rumor mill to run ragged trying to figure it out. Jiraiya, no research this trip. I want you to teach him every offensive and defensive skill you can. Also teach him to counter the 5-star seal. If Orochimaru makes an appearance, then he will try and shut the Kyuubi off. Teach it to Sakura as well, Tsunade. Kushina asked, how long you been planning this? The third said, I have had over a week since I knew Naruto should be able to do the Hiraishin, so I had planned on him coming out on the missions I got for him, but with the threat of Orochimaru and the others I need to make sure we can tip the scales as much as possible. Since last week I've been trying to figure a way to get him in the open where he can't be touched. Tsunade said, alright, but no matter what, during the exams everyone will know the truth about our family, and if they don't like it we are gone. From what Jiraiya told me, Kushina never officially became more than a civilian, and as our apprentices we can take the kids and I will figure something out about the girl since she seems to be glued to Naruto. With Zabuza and Haku. Zabuza was looking down at the scar-faced of one academy teacher named Iruka who works at the Hokage Tower part-time and said, you heard me correctly. Iruka said, but Naruto name is not Namikaze. Yamato said, actually Iruka, it is. He's the son of the Yondaime and is also one of the sponsors of these two. Turns out he has more family than anyone thought and they are here for him. Iruka said, so that's why, trailing off as he realized why Naruto was chosen. Haku said, is that all the info you need on us? Iruka asked, one more question, do either of you have a bloodline? Haku looked at Zabuza and saw him nod and said, yes, I do. I have the ability to control ice. Yamato said, Iruka, all information on them besides name and skill level is to be listed as Namikaze clan secrets. Iruka nodded and said, very well. I believe that is all. Sakura and Tenten had just walked inside the Wolfclaw weapon shop and Dustin smiled and Tenten said, Dad, I need to talk to Sakura upstairs, okay? Girl stuff. Oh, and if Naruto shows up I am not here until 5. Dustin said, right. I will tell him if he shows up. How was the mission? Tenten said, same old. Same old. As they walked up the stairs. When they got to Tenten's room Sakura asked, so what is it you wanted to talk to me about? Tenten sighed and said, look, I did not want to mention it earlier, but is there anything Naruto not telling me that you can think of? Sakura was confused and said, not that I know of. Why? Tenten said, well, it's just that, when I found out about him and those 2 women it made me afraid that he might be with other girls. Sakura snickered and said, no, that is one thing I can tell you for sure. My brother has always been an idiot when it comes to girls. Think about what he said about that. He did not want that at first. Then think about who they were. Even I have heard of Anko, the snake mistress as she is sometimes called, or sadistic bitch, and then there Kurenai. That one floored me though. Tenten sighed and said, so you don't think he's cheating on me or even thinking of getting rid of me? Sakura shook her head and said, no Tenten. Haku told me that after I was safe and before he flashed away you were the name he said, not the teams but you. He cares for you. Even more than the crush he had on me before we found out we were siblings. However, you do know that when people find out about his bloodline, he will have to have one other wife. Tenten nods and said, I know, and he and I both hate that, but if it's someone who will see him the way I do and does not try and get rid of me, then I am okay with it. I guess I am just scared. I mean, I know we have been together almost every day for the last couple of months and I care for him, and now that he is having to leave, I just. Listen. Pointing to an air vent in the floor. Downstairs, Naruto had just walked in and said, How's it going, Dustin Sensei? Dustin smiled and said, Ah, Naruto, if you're looking for Tenten, she's not here right now. Said she had something to take care of before 5. Naruto said, That's alright. I actually came to talk to you about something. Up in Tenten room, Tenten looked at Sakura and mouthed, What does he want to talk to my dad about? Sakura shrugged her shoulders and listened. Dustin said, So, what can I help you with? Naruto fidgeted and said, Well, you see, I got to leave the village tomorrow and I am not going to be back until right before the exams. Dustin said, Really? That's too bad. So did you come by to tell me that or what? Naruto said, No, it's about Tenten. You see, I care for her a lot and well, the thing is, I was kind of wanting to ask her something and I read in a book that you should ask the girl's father first. Upstairs, Sakura covered her mouth and Tenten was wide-eyed gaping and both listened in. Dustin said, And what is that? You know I love my daughter with my whole life and I would kill anyone that hurt her. In a stern voice, though he was laughing his off inside. Naruto sighed and said, Well, you see, since me and Tenten haven't been really apart more than 3 days when she had that mission out of town since we first started seeing each other, and I want her to know I care for her and will be back, so I want to show her how much I love her and ask her to marry me. As he fidgeted his foot. Tenten and Sakura both did a silent squeal at that upstairs and listened to what happened. Dustin asked, So you want to ask my daughter to marry you, huh? If she agreed, when would it be? Naruto said, Well, not today if that's what you're worried about. I know from living on my own how hard it is to survive, and I know we would have to save up some money as well as make sure we can support each other, so I want to wait until we both make chunin so that way we can have more money and don't have as much trouble as we do as now. I don't want to burden the rest of my family with my responsibilities. Dustin said, Seems to me that you have put a lot of thought behind it. Have you gotten her a ring yet? Naruto said, I have not bought one, but I did make one. Dustin said, Really? Let me see it. Naruto reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring and handed it to Dustin, who laughed and said, I see, you put a Hiraishin seal on it, huh? Naruto nods and said, Yeah, when we were on the mission Tenten had to use the kunia I gave her and I feared what would happen if she did not have it, so I thought if she agreed, then that way if she ever needs me I can be there in a flash by channeling chakra into it. Dustin asked, When did you have time to make it and where did you get the jewel? Naruto said, Well, I made it from a kunia I melted around 2 weeks ago and I just got done adding the seal a little while ago after I got back. I done tested it and it works. As for the jewel, it came from an earring I found one day on the ground. I know it's not really much, but the old man told me when I turned it into him and he gave it back to me a month later that it was now mine since no one claimed it and said it was a diamond. He said it was worth a lot of money and are very rare, so I kept on to it all these years. Dustin said, So why did you just not buy a ring, huh? Naruto said, Well, I thought about it, but with the way most of the villagers are, I did not want to go through that, and I also felt that if she knew I made it then she would love it more. So does that mean I can ask her? Dustin said, Yeah, you can ask her, but have you thought about how you're going to ask her? I mean, you seem nervous. Naruto sighed and said, I am. A lot of things happened lately and she found out a lot about my past that no one knew about, and I hope she still feels the same for me that she did before. Especially with me leaving in the morning at sunrise. Dustin smiled and said, When I asked her mother to marry me, I rehearsed the lines for days for the right thing to say. I learned it's best to just speak from your heart, so why don't you rehearse it since she's not here? I mean, that way you can be ready for when you do ask her. Naruto said, That's a great idea. How do I do it exactly? Dustin slapped his forehead and said, Usually guys get down on one knee and hold up the ring and tell the girl why they love them. Naruto nods and got on one knee and held up the ring, and Dustin said, Close your eyes, kid, it's more calming that way and just speak from your heart. Naruto closed his eyes and Dustin did a hand sign and replaced himself with Tenten, who was above him in the room above. He knew they were over the airvent and knew it worked both ways, so he had heard what she said to Sakura. Tenten blinked and saw Naruto down on one knee and she wondered how she got there, and Naruto said with his eyes closed, "Tenten, we have only been together a couple of months, but to me it feels like my entire life. Before you came into my life I was always lonely, but since I found you, or you found me, but it don't matter, but I have only been lonely when I am not around you. Your smell, your voice, your laugh, your smile, your taste. It fills me with the feelings I thought I would never feel, so I ask you, no, I beg you, Tenten, will you marry me?" Tenten had her hand to her heart and leaned forward and kissed him, making him open his eyes wide, and when she pulled back she said, "Yes, I would love nothing more than to be your wife," as she smiled. A squeal from the stairs made both look at Sakura and Dustin, who smirked, and Sakura said, "Congratulations, you two. I can't believe that you are engaged now," as she smiled. Naruto said as he looked at Dustin, "You told me she was not here." Dustin said, "So what? I figured you needed a helping hand. So what if I lied? I am her father and your future father-in-law. It's my job to make your life hell," with a smile on his face. Naruto was about to say something when Tenten kissed him again and grabbed the ring and slipped it on as she broke the kiss and looked at it and asked, "How did you know my ring size?" Naruto said, "Well, remember that day you showed me how to channel chakra into my finger to test metal strength, and you jabbed your into the log FYING 4 holes in it. I made a model off of your ring finger with metal and then freed it and used it as the cast for the ring." Dustin said, "I see all those hours of working in the forge paid off, huh? Tell you what, why don't you all get out of here since you have to leave in the morning and spend the day together?" All three left and Sakura said, "So what are you going to do now?" Tenten said, "Well, I think we should tell your mom and grandparents so that way they know." Naruto said, "But I thought you would want to spend the day with me alone since I was leaving." Tenten said, "I do, but you also need to spend time with your family. We got our whole lives ahead of us, Naruto-kun, so let's go." Naruto nods and the three lead them went toward Sakura home. People were giving them the same looks, but they ignored it until one man said, "What that demon doing with those two girls? I bet he was stopped when a vine came out of the wood telephone pole behind him and wrapped around his mouth, shutting him up." The three kids looked at each other and walked off, and Sakura asked, "What did you do that for, Naruto?" when they were far enough away. Naruto said, "I didn't. I just thought I wish he would shut up and it happened." Tenten said, "Perhaps you should guard your thoughts, Naruto. If the plants can feel your thoughts and act on them, then you need to make sure you don't want someone dead on accident." Naruto nods and they arrived at Sakura home, and she went in and saw that a black-haired woman she never met before was packing her things, and Sakura asked, "Who are you and what are you doing in my home?" Shizune said, "You must be Sakura. I am Shizune, Tsunade's assistant. Her, Jiraiya-sama and Kushina-san are all at your new residence getting stuff unpacked. You're moving into your family estates along with Naruto-kun." Tenten said, "Hey Naruto, think a clone army would be of use here." Naruto smirked and created 50 Kajbunshians, and Tenten pulled out some extra scrolls she always carried. In about 2 hours they had everything sealed in the scrolls, just as Kushina walked back in and was gaping and asked, "How did you get done so fast and where is everything?" Tenten held up some scrolls and Kushina nods and said, "Well, I guess we can go then." "Follow me," Tenten said. "Actually, me and my fiancé are going to get his stuff," as she grabbed Naruto and took him toward his place. Kushina nods and walks a few steps and freezes and asked, "Did I hear wrong or did she say faints?" Sakura smiled and said, "Yeah mom, Naruto just asked her to marry him a little while ago." Kushina sighed and said, "God, I don't want to be a grandma yet." Sakura said, "Relax, they're waiting until they both make chunin." Kushina let out a breath she did not realize she was holding and said, "Well, let's go and tell the others." Tenten and Naruto arrived at his apartment and went inside. They started to seal his stuff, or at least the stuff that he wanted to take with him, which wound up being only a few things. After they finished, Tenten asked, "So what do you want to do now?" Naruto said, "How about we go watch the sunset together?" Tenten nods and they both walked to the Hokage monument. As they sat there watching the sunset, Tenten said, I am going to miss you. Naruto nods and said, I am going to think of you every second I am gone. Are you sure? I mean, about being my wife. As he was fidgeting, Tenten grabbed his hands and said, how many times have I ever done something to make you doubt me? Naruto thought and said, 47 times. Tenten blinked and slapped him upside the head and said, I mean about our relationship, not working or training. Naruto said, never. Tenten asked, then why do you doubt me? No. Naruto looked down and said, because now I am what the Popol always said I was. A killer. Tenten's eyes softened and said, Naruto, did you notice all the dead merc on the bridge when you arrived? I killed over 50 already and I don't see myself as a murderer. I see myself as a hero. If those men would have lived they would have went and hurt or killed who knows how many more men, women, and children. You killed people who had not only kidnapped your sister but also men that would probably have killed me and my team and yours. You saved all of our lives. I know it's hard with the first kill but you sometimes have to do it. Naruto said. Do you know the history of the Hiraishin, Tenten? Tenten sighed and said, that's what you're worried about. You're afraid that now that you killed and know the jutsu your father used to kill 1000 Iwa nins during the war you're going to have to do the same thing and you're afraid what people will say or see you as. Naruto said. Not people, you. As he looked at her. Tenten said. Naruto-kun, I don't care if you never kill or you kill a million people. I will always love you. I know you're going to have to kill and odds are you will do it while away. As long as you don't kill just for fun and stay the same person you or I will love you. Promise me that if it comes down to you coming back to me or you killing that you will come back to me. Naruto hugged her and said, I promise. Tenten smiled and let a tear fall and said, I am glad. As they broke apart she said, looks like we missed the sunset. Naruto nods and said, I meant every word I said earlier. Tenten said, I know. Just promise me that when you find someone else to marry you also that you do it for the right reasons. Naruto said, I promise I will do all I can to fulfill that one but I fear what the future brings. Tenten stood up and said, so do I but as long as we're together nothing can stop us. Naruto kissed her and soon they went toward town and Tenten stopped and asked, Naruto-kun, where is your new home at? Naruto stopped and scratched his head and said, truthfully, I don't know. Tenten slapped her forehead and said, come on, you can stay at my place since we packed yours. Naruto was about to say something when she said, you can sleep on the fold-up bed. And he nodded. When they got back to the shop and explained to her dad what happened he laughed and told them to use protection making both blush. After eating a quiet dinner together and getting ready for bed they both fell into a restful sleep. Tenten awoke in the middle of the night and looked at Naruto and left the room to take care of something. About an hour later she was leaving the sealing room when Naruto walked up and asked, what's wrong Tenten? Tenten said, nothing, let's go back to bed. And grabbed his hand and led him back to her room but would not let go of him and pulled him onto her bed as she laid on his shoulder and went back to sleep. The next morning Naruto awoke and tried to move but Tenten held onto him like he was all she had to stay alive. His movement caused her to wake up and she looked at him and said, it's time huh? Naruto nodded with a sad face on and they both got ready for the day with Tenten taking a shower first. While Naruto was in the shower Tenten went and got what she had worked on the previous night and walked to the bathroom. She heard the water in the shower still running so she picked the lock and grabbed his cloths and set a new set on the counter before closing the door. Dustin asked, what are you doing dear? As he rounded the corner. Tenten said, I gave Naruto-kun a going away present. I will pay for it out of my money for the mission. Dustin nods and said, what is it? Tenten said, just some new cloths. As she went back to her room and packed his cloths in a scroll. When Naruto got out of the shower he dried off and noticed his cloths had been replaced and a note was on top of it. He read the note. Dear Naruto-kun, if you're going to show the world you're the son of the Yondaime then you need to look the part. Here is my going away present to you. I hope you enjoy. There are 3 seals on each item. A cleaning seal, a repair seal, and an alteration seal. It will allow for you to grow without having to buy new cloths. Love. Your future wife. Tension. Naruto smiled and looked at the cloths and got a huge grin. Tenten was sitting in the front of the store with her dad behind the counter when Naruto walked in. Dustin was wide-eyed and gapping and Tenten was blushing. Naruto was dressed in a pair of black pants with built-in holsters and an extra one for the Hiraishin kuniyas. A tight blue shirt with built-in body armor and a green ninja vest loaded with storage scrolls including 2 for the Hiraishin. On top of that was a white cloak with green flames across the bottom and the kanji for the Namikaze second flash. It also had the hoops for Naruto's sword on the back so that way he could still use his style and the kanji were spaced so the sword would not block it. The finisher was on Naruto's face was a partial mask like Kakashi but his was green with blue mixed in. Dustin asked, "Is that you, Naruto?" Naruto said, "Yeah, so how do I look?" Tenten said, "I got the funny feeling you're going to get fangirls. You look so good I want to kiss you." As she walked over and pulled down his face mask and gasped. Naruto blinked and asked, "What's wrong?" Tenten said, "Your whiskers, they're thinner than they were." As she grabbed a display mirror and showed him. Naruto said, "Maybe it has something to do with the green chakra." Dustin said, "I hate to do it but you said you needed to leave at sunrise and you're already late." Naruto nods and grabs Tenten's hand and they left the store and Dustin whispered, "Be careful kid, if not for yourself then for her." As Naruto and Tenten made their way through town several people were wide-eyed looking at the ghost of the Yondaime walking through the village. They both ignored them all as they approached the gate. They saw the rest of Naruto family all standing there and they were all pale along with the third who had came to see them off. Sakura stuttered. "Naruto, is that you?" Naruto said, "Yeah, you all look like you saw a ghost." Kushina said, "You look almost exactly like your father." Tenten said, "Told you that you needed to dress the part." Kushina asked, "Why did you not come to our new place last night, Naruto? We were going to throw you both a party to celebrate." Tenten rubbed her head and said, "Nobody told us where it was and since we had already packed Naruto's place I let him stay at mine." Kushina looked at her and Tenten blushed and said, "I can still use the summon." And Kushina nods making everyone but Sakura look at her funny. The third said, "Well, there's no backing out now is there Naruto?" Naruto said, "No and I am glad." Sakura said, "I am going to miss you Naruto." Naruto hugs her and said, "Take care of yourself sis and look after Tenshin for me." Sakura nods and Naruto lets go and Kushina said, "Screw it," and hugged Naruto also and he hugged her back and she said, "Please be careful. I don't want to lose you Aegean." Naruto said, "You're not, I got a promise to keep." Tsunade walked over and reached behind her neck and untied her necklace and said, "Naruto, this necklace belonged to the Shadaime Hokage. He gave it to me and I gave it to my younger brother who died during the war. I then gave it to my fiancé who died. Both dreamed about being Hokage like you do. I always thought that this necklace was cursed after that but I want to take one more chance. This necklace is supposed to not only be able to amplify your bloodline but also to help control demons so I believe it was just waiting for you. Please prove me right just this once." Naruto put the necklace on and suddenly he was covered in green chakra Aegean for a moment and then it receded back in. Naruto looked at the necklace and he noticed that it had chakra moving in it showing a burning leaf inside of it shocking everyone. Tsunade said, "I never seen that happen before." The third said, "It's almost like it was mod for him." Naruto said, "Thanks Granny." Only for his headband to be knocked off and then kissed on the forehead. The third said, "Naruto, I have already gave Jiraiya your first 5 missions. Each mission will be carried out by you and Jiraiya will only help if it gets out of hand. This is both training you but also to see how good you really are and what you can do." Naruto nods and Jiraiya said, "Come on kid, we got a lot of ground to cover." As he took off away from the village. Naruto turned and kissed Tenten one last time before he took of following Jiraiya. Everyone was standing there until they were gone and Tsunade asked, "Does Tenten have any mission yet?" The third said, "Not until her teammates return." Tsunade reached into a pocket and pulled out 2 scrolls and handed one to Tenten and the other to Sakura and said, "I want both of you to go home and change and meet me at the academy in 1 hour for training." Both nod and jump away in 2 different directions and the third said, "What are you doing?" Tsunade said, "I gave Iruka the day off at the academy as I need his class for some special training." The third said, "Very well, I hope you know what you're doing and could you tell me ahead of time next time? She nods and Kushina asked, what are you up to? Tsunade said, oh, just a lesson I learned a few years back about kids, sweets, and dodging. Kushina said, never mind, I won't ask. I am going to go and start my own training. I trust you won't kill them. Tsunade put her finger to her chin and said, kill, no. Maim. Maybe. Both laughed and Tsunade went to the Asimi. Naruto was following Jiraiya and asked, so what's the first mission? Jiraiya tossed him a scroll and Naruto opened it and started to read and said, so we got a group of bandits that are terrorizing a village a half day away from Konoha. They want us to capture them or kill them. C rank. Doesn't sound too hard. Jiraiya said, good. It's your now. CYA. And melted into a pile of mud making Naruto stop and look around. He then looked at where the town was located and saw the map with it and took off toward where the village should be. Back in Konoha, Tenten and Sakura both walked onto the academy wearing a white outfit like a painter would wear along with some weights. They saw Tsunade standing in front of about 30 kids and she said, so do you all understand the rules? They all said, yes. Konohamaru stood up and said, but boss will kill me for hurting them. Tsunade said, don't worry, Naruto won't touch you, trust me. Sakura asked, what's going on Tsunade? Tsunade said, simple, we got a class of 30 kids here. They have already divided up into 3 teams of 10. We have the orange team, the red team, and the blue team. When I say go they are all going to grab one of these plastic baseball bats that are covered in paint for their team and divide into 2 teams for each color and try and hit you as many times as they can. The team that gets the most hits on both of you at the end of the day will get free ice cream. Your job is to dodge as much as possible and not get hit. You are not allowed to fight back or jump in trees or leave this field. This will help you learn to dodge, speed, endurance, as well as taking hits on your body. The only thing they can't hit is your head and they won't stop hitting you until I tell them to because an enemy won't either. Tenten said. But, Tsunade screamed. Begin. Tenten and Sakura paled as the 30 kids all divided up as they grabbed their bats and started attacking them. Naruto arrived at the village and saw that the bandits are already there. He could tell the bandits because they all had swords axes as the villagers only had pitchforks. Naruto narrowed his eyes and created 50 Kajbunshians and sent them toward the bandits. The bandits saw the mass of ninja coming at them and started to run until the leader of the bandits stepped forward and went through some hand signs and said, Earth style, Earth tidal wave. And a wall of earth came up and started traveling at high speed toward the group of ninja. Naruto watched from his tree as his Kajbunshians were destroyed and frowned. He thought that he could fight the men on one combat and kick their but this man just took out all his Kajbunshin in one sweep. The leader said, fan out and search for him. The guy who used those Kajbunshians is around here somewhere. There may be more. I want his head. And you. Pointing to the mayor of the village, I will have my men do as they please to your family while you are forced to watch it happen and then I will kill you for bringing Konoha ninja here. Naruto narrowed his eyes. One thing he could not stand was someone doing that right after it nearly happening to his sister. An image of Sakura and Tenten popped in his head and he gritted his teeth and remembered what Tenten said. Flashback. Tenten's eyes softened and said, Naruto, did you notice all the dead merc on the bridge when you arrived? I killed over 50 already and I don't see myself as a murderer. I see myself as a hero. If those men would have lived they would have went and hurt or killed who knows how many more men, women, and children. You killed people who had not only kidnapped your sister but also men that would probably have killed me and my team and yours. You saved all of our lives. I know it's hard with the first kill but you sometimes have to do it. Flashback end. Naruto said, to terrorize a village is one thing but I will not let you or your men do that to any woman or children. He jumped down and slowly pulled his sword out and started walking toward the men who were heading toward the woods where the Kajbunshin came from. Jiraiya, who was in a tree hiding, frowned but waited to see what was going to happen. Naruto reached for his hand and hit the release seal on his weights and vanished from view of the bandits. Suddenly 3 screamed as blood sprayed into the air as Naruto cut the men, severing an arm and cutting the sides of 2 others. Naruto had charged right down the middle of the men and did a spin while in the group but not before throwing some acorns on the ground in the middle of the group. He appeared behind the men and said, You will not hurt anyone anymore. In a cold voice sending chills down everyone's spine including Jiraiya who had seen him move and what he did. The men turned and laughed and said, "What an idea." He was cut off when a tree limb shot out of the ground and pierced him in the neck. Naruto went through some hand signs and said, "Wood style. Birth of the dense forest." And the seeds burst open and then the trees shot out of the ground surrounding the men and it formed a cage around the men. They screamed out as they tried to get out but the branches had intertwined around them and made it where they could not move inside the cage. Naruto was about to mourn for killing that man but then he had to dodge as a huge ball of earth came flying at him. He had forgotten about the leader. The leader said, "I must say boy, I am surprised you took out my men so easily but they were only grunts and I can always get more." Naruto looked at him and said, "Not if you're dead." Jiraiya frowned and said, "Kid, be careful and don't become a person who enjoys killing or I may have to stop you before you do something you would regret. This missing Iwa Nin is a chunin. Let's see what you can do." The leader said, "You actually think you can kill me? I admit that trick with Kajbunshin as well as the wood ability is a surprise and I love how you're trying to impersonate the yellow flash with the look but you are nowhere near his level. You're not even worthy of the dirt on his feet so I will just end you here and now before you think you can do something even more stupid than impersonate a Hokage. Besides, you should be out of chakra soon." Naruto smirked and said, "Impersonate huh? If that's what you think I am doing then you are dead wrong. I don't impersonate my family, I am learning everything they can do and take it to the next level. You seem to honor my father so much I think I will give you a sample of why I feared him." The leader narrowed his eyes. This kid was not normal and did not even appear to be tired. Knowing how Kajbunshin worked he was sure this kid should be on the ground. His thoughts were interrupted when Naruto sheathed his sword after flicking his wrist to remove the blood off of it. Naruto then pulled out a single kunai that made the leader recognized and he started to back away. Naruto smirked and said, "Gotcha." The leader blinked and was about to say something when a group of vines shot out of the ground and grabbed the mon's hands and feet binding him to the ground. He tried to move his fingers to do a replacement but the vines made hand signs impossible. Naruto walked over and held the kunai at the mon's neck and said, "Since I see you have a slash through your headband that means you're a missing nin. I think I should send you back to Konoha for interrogation." The mayor of the village smiled and said, "Thank you sir. I am George, the leader of this village and I want to say thank you from my entire village for capturing these men and saving our village." Naruto nods and asked, "I was just doing the mission that you paid for." "I am Naruto Namikaze." The Iwa Nin eyes got wide and said, "Namikaze, then you the son of the yellow flash. Still trying to get up but not being able to." Naruto ignored him and asked, "If you need anything else please let us know." And he hit the nin on the back of the neck knocking him out. Jiraiya appeared and said, "Well done kid." Naruto said, "We need to take these men away." Jiraiya bit his thumb and ran through some hand signs and summoned a toad about 6 foot tall and had 2 swords on his back and said, "Naruto, this is Gamakuden. He's a warrior toad. Gamakuden, I need you to watch these men until you arrive to take them away." The toad nodded and Jiraiya tossed Naruto another scroll and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto groaned and said, "I am really starting to hate him." The mayor said, "I will be sure to tell everyone about how Konoha saved our village and I hope to see you Aegean someday." Naruto was it. Naruto nods and said, "Yeah, Naruto Namikaze. I guess I better go." And disappeared from view since the man could not track his movements. Naruto stopped a little ways away from the village and put his weights back on and was about to leave when Jiraiya appeared beside him and said, "Okay, I got something I want you to work on while you travel. I am going to teach you the Rasengan. It has 3 steps. The first step is you must bust a water balloon like this." As he held one up and it rippled before busting. He then pulled out a scroll and handed it to Naruto and said, "There are around 200 balloons in this scroll already filled with water. I want you to only use chakra and pop them. When you can pop all 200 with chakra only then I will give you the next part. Good luck." And he went up in a puff of smoke. Naruto said, "That's 3 times he's left me alone using 3 different ways. I am going to hurt him." He then pulled out the mission scroll and opened it and said, "Escort. Who the hell hires a ninja to be an escort and make it AB rank 1? It says it's in a town called Kanku City about 20 miles west of here. He then sighed and looked at the sun and saw it was just barely noon, and he reached into his pocket and brought out a scroll Tenten had made for him and opened it and put some unsealed the first item and smiled. Rice balls. He mused as he ate them before taking off toward his next mission. Naruto had been traveling for about 4 hours now when it happened. He landed on a tree branch he was jumping to when it snapped and he started to fall toward the ground. He thought, "Catch me." And nothing happened, and it was too late as he hit the ground hard and rolled. Pissed off, he screams, "Why did you not catch me?" And all the trees and grass suddenly shift and a scream was heard. Naruto blinked and saw a creature fall out of a tree and hit the ground hard. Naruto started walking toward the creature and noticed it looked like a Venus fly trap with a man in the middle, except he had burns and blood all over his body. The man looked at Naruto and said, "Stay back, don't come any closer," as he tried to get away from Naruto. Jiraiya appeared and said, "Stop Naruto, he's with Sasuke." Naruto remembered that name and got mad Aegean, and suddenly the man screamed and more burns covered his body, causing Naruto to forget his madness. The man said, "Please stop doing that." Jiraiya acted all innocent and asked, "What are we doing?" as a child who knew he was in trouble would do. The man said, "His chakra, it's poison to me and all plants." Naruto blinked and said, "What?" Jiraiya said, "He's right Naruto, I will explain later. Don't get mad, but I want you to walk toward him slowly." Naruto nodded and started to walk and nothing happened. Naruto blinked and the man said, "You damn demon." Naruto narrowed his eyes and suddenly the man screamed and Naruto jumped back and Jiraiya laughed and said, "So tell me, what does Sasuke want with the tailed demons?" The man said, "I want talk." Jiraiya said, "Naruto." He called Tenten A. Naruto was pissed and the man screamed as more burns appeared on his body. Jiraiya asked, "What was that?" The man panted and said, "To control the world and bring about world peace. We want to bankrupt all the other nations and then stop all wars." Jiraiya asked, "How do you use the demons?" Naruto watched and the man looked around and Naruto got angry for the guy trying to escape and the man screamed again and said, "All right. We have a statue that is made from some special wood that can neutralize demon chakra, and the rings we have make it where we can use them like the vessels could. Please stop." Naruto asked, "Why are you here?" The man said, "I was following Tay weird plant chakra I felt." Jiraiya asked, "Who is your leader?" The man said, "Pain. His name is Pain." Naruto walked forward and said, "What's your name?" The man said, "Zetsu." Naruto pulled out his sword and sliced Zetsu in half and said, "Your lettuce now." He then flicked his wrist and shot the blood off of it and looked at the man before he reached and grabbed the ring off his hand and put it on his finger. Jiraiya said, "You could have let him live." Naruto said, "No, I was told that every enemy that I let get away will be twice as strong the next time I face him, so I figured end him before he comes for me and my family." "So what's going on?" Jiraiya said, "After we got back from Wave, the Hokage got a report about a man who had a vine attack him in town. When Yamato and I went to check it out, the vine was completely dead. No life at all in it. Most plants, even after they die, still have chakra moving in them for years if the plant was, say, a tree where grass lasts only a few months." Naruto nods and said, "It's something to do with the cells that carry oxygen and other gases as well as nutrients." Jiraiya nodded and said, "Yamato and I figured it had something to do with your bloodline, but we were not for sure. I sent a toad to look at the spot me and you fought, and all the plants in that area are dead now." Naruto was wide-eyed and said, "My bloodline killed them." Jiraiya said, "Yes and no. You notice how you got right next to Zetsu and nothing happened, but then when you got mad something else happens." Naruto asked, "What?" Jiraiya said, "Yamato said before he started to train you, when you got mad you would accidentally draw on Kyuubi chakra. Now that your bloodline has fully awakened, you are still drawing Kyuubi chakra, but now it is not going to you but to your plants and kills them." Naruto asked, "What does that mean for me exactly?" Jiraiya looked around and Naruto followed his eyes and he noticed that all the trees and everything was starting to die, and he said, "Remember how you would send your chakra out and then come back with nature chakra?" Naruto nods and Jiraiya said, "When you are mad you are sending out Kyuubi chakra and still drawing nature chakra, but after the plant loses all its nature chakra it can't handle the demon chakra and dies." It is also why when you're mad you can control plants with thought, because basically it is your chakra in the plants and mutating the cells and making them to turn into vines, bamboo and other things when they should not be able to. Naruto asked. So I can't use my bloodline? Jiraiya said. I never said that. Here. As he handed Naruto a seed and said, okay, channel your chakra and think of what you want that to do. It's a rose seed. Think about what a rose is like from your lessons and then allow it to alter based on that. Naruto thought a moment and suddenly the seed sprouted into a rose whip and he asked, okay, what now? Jiraiya grabbed it and held it and asked, notice anything? Naruto looked and said, it's not dying. Jiraiya nodded and said, that's the way your bloodline should be used. Don't get mad and angry if you can keep from it, and if you are mad only use your bloodline for a defense. If you use it that way you will not only keep from killing the plants but also make it where you can pass what you learn to your kids since they won't have Kyuubi. Naruto nods and asked, so why did you not tell me this sooner? Jiraiya said, we were not sure about it so I had to wait to see when you got mad Aegean. I was going to tell you after I got the report from the toad we left back with the bandits. When you actually used a jutsu even though you were mad it stayed, but after about 5 minutes the vines you had holding the nin down died and dissolved so the toad sat down on him. Naruto nods and said, so no more using it like I did against you. Jiraiya said, I don't know, you might be able to do it if you find the right way, but doing it like you did when you were mad won't work. Okay, I want you to create some Kajbunshians and have them work on the Rasengan while you travel toward your next mission. Naruto nods and creates 1000 Kajbunshians and Jiraiya was wide-eyed and said, damn, so what's the others going to do since I only gave you 200 water balloons? Naruto asked, do you have the other things needed for the other steps? Jiraiya sighed and pulled out another scroll and said, inside are rubber balls, same thing as the first test. You need to work on popping this also, and you need to be able to do both before you go to the last step. Naruto nods and hands out the water balloons and the rubber balls and asked, you got anything else they can work on? Jiraiya thought for a moment and said, yeah, I got a jutsu you can try. This jutsu will allow you to use your earth affinity. It's called earth style. Mudwave. You have to push your chakra into the ground and pull the earth back and then send it toward your enemy. Here are the handins. As he showed them to the clones who all nodded and went off to work. The real Naruto asked, so what now? Jiraiya said, simple, you have a mission to complete. Go. Naruto nods and jumps off toward the way he was going before, and Jiraiya walked over to the body and frowned as he looked at the man and said, you're lucky Naruto that his bloodline makes him part plant or you could have been dead. As he pulls out a kunai and seals the head into a scroll. Naruto was running and stops for a moment and looks the mission scroll and read it Aegean. Mission B rank escort mission. A client has asked for a ninja from Konoha to escort a guest to the wedding in the village called Kanku City. You are to go as a representative of your village and are not to fight unless you are physically assaulted or ordered to by the employer. Naruto asked, why would they want us not to fight? I guess there's only one way to find out. As he headed toward the village. Tenten was sitting on the ground as Tsunade had called a break. One break in 8 hours to allow the kids to eat, and now they got one more break. She was covered in bruises as was Sakura. She sighed and said, I bet Naruto-kun don't have it this hard. Sakura said, I don't know, but I know one thing, they're the real demons. Tenten could only nod and said, when this is over I am killing Konohamaru. Tsunade telling him that he would never be Hokage if he hit lightly was the wrong thing to say. I think he went from hitting ground balls to grand slams. Sakura could only nod as she rubbed a bruise and said, what about her giving them all that candy during the break? Tenten asked, what next? Tsunade walked up and said, next is the final challenge for the day. Oh Guy, are you ready? Tenten paled and Guy appeared with 2 green spandex outfits and screamed, yes Suand. If they stop before the sun sets then they have to wear these youthful outfits to regain their youthfulness until the Chunin exams. Tsunade nods and said, ready, set, go. Tenten and Sakura both paled and ran as fast as they could away with Guy behind them screaming about the flames of youth. The next day when Naruto arrived in Kanku City he soon found his way to the residence where he was to meet the client. He was a little stiff from sleeping in a tree but decided it would be better than spending money for a room. Money he really did not have a lot of. When he arrived, he knocked and a woman opened the door and asked, "Can I help you?" Naruto said, "Yes, I was sent by Konoha." The woman said, "Oh yes, please come with me." Naruto nods and follows her into the building and soon into a room with 6 other people in it, and the first thing he notices is that they are all ninja from different village. The woman said, "What is your name, dear?" Naruto said, "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." All the people in the room flinched and looked at him, and an Iwa nin said, "What was your name?" Naruto said, "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." He asked, "Are you any relations to the Yellow Flash?" Naruto said, "He was my father, and you are?" Trying not to act hostile even though he felt ki coming from the man, and he silently thanked Yamato for teaching him how to ignore it. The man said, "My name is Bradis." Naruto said, "Pleasure," remembering his lessons on diplomacy as well as the books from the library. He then looked at everyone in the room and saw a girl with a cloud height who felt different to him and said, "So what's your name, miss?" She said, "Yugito," in a neutral voice. Naruto asked, "So what are we here for exactly?" to everyone in the room. A blonde-haired girl with a sand height said, "We don't know yet. I am Tamari," as she held out her hand. Naruto did a formal bow and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you." Just then the door opened and an old man walked in and said, "Okay, now that everyone is here, I can explain what's going on. This village has had a civil war going on for the last 2 years. As the leader of the village, I was able to get the 2 parties to agree to a truce and have agreed for the eldest children of the 2 faction leaders to marry. However, they did not do it without wanting a few things they thought would be impossible, and you are the last thing they want. They wanted someone from all 7 major nations, and they have to walk down the aisle together in groups of 2. That is why I requested a ninja from each of your villages. I don't care how you escort each other down the aisle, but I don't want any fighting. You have 10 minutes. And he turned and left. Naruto looked around and Bradis turned to the grass nin and said, "You're with me." The grass nin asked, "Why is that?" Bradis said, "If I am near the Konoha or Suna nin, I will kill them, and I don't want to be by the demon whore. They should kill all you Jinchurikis and be done with it." The rain nin said, "Same for me," as he stood by Bradis. Yugito flinched at what Bradis called her, and Naruto narrowed his eyes, and the mist nin asked, "Uzumaki, that's an unusual name. Where did you get it?" Naruto said, "It's my mother's maiden name." The mist nin said, "Really? Is she from Konoha originally?" Naruto said, "Perhaps she was, but I don't know her as I never really got to know her in the short time we had together," as he narrowed his eyes. The mist nin said, "I will walk with you also, Bradis," shooting a glance at Naruto. Mist never liked the Yondaime, and the name Uzumaki made him remember something about someone the Mizukage wanted killed, but he could not remember what. Naruto said, "Then if the 2 lovely ladies don't have any objections, I will walk you both. Besides, I can tell the difference between a prisoner and a prison," as he glanced at Yugito, who had wide eyes. Tamari said, "No objection from me," knowing what he was referring to but also a little nervous. Yugito said, "None here also," wondering why he acted like that. Just then the man who hired them came in and asked, "Are you all ready?" Naruto nods and held up his arms, and both ladies linked arms with him. He then followed the client to the wedding hall, and after a small simple ceremony the 2 heirs were married and the peace treaty was signed. The client came over and said, "Thank you, Aegean, and if you would please make sure to leave the village before anything happens." Naruto nods and turned to leave when Yugito grabbed him and asked, "Why did you not act like most when he called me a demon whore and you made reference to me being a Jinchuriki?" Naruto glanced around and said, "I guess I know the pain, as I am a prison also for a prisoner," as he turned and started to leave as her eyes got wide. Tamari, who was close by, heard him and was also wide-eyed. When Naruto walked outside, a battle toad was standing there with a scroll, and Naruto took it inside. A rank item recovery. A former missing nin of Konoha Aoi Rokusho is now a Junin of Rain. Your mission is to recover the item he stole when he defected. The legendary Raijin sword of the Nadaime Hokage. He was reported to be in the general area of Kanku City with a couple other Rain nin. Your mission is to take back the sword at all cost and if possible capture or kill Aoi. Known to be an expert at torture. Naruto sighed and the toad said, Jiraiya-sama said, for the last step of that jutsu you are to put both step 1 and step 2 together without blowing yourself up and without popping the balloons. As he hands another scroll. Naruto glances at the rain nin who is there and sees that he is not the man in the picture included. He turns and leaves even though he can feel Ki coming at him from behind. He ran into a restaurant to eat before leaving town and after eating went to the restroom and created a kajbunshin and had it lead out of town going the way he was heading before he stopped to eat. He waited about 5 minutes and hanged before heading out the other way. He had just made it back where he started from when the info from his kajbunshin came to him as it was destroyed. Apparently the Iwa nin does not like him. Naruto smirked and said, "Thank God for pranking." As he looked around and saw that Yugito had already left but Tamari as well as the rain nin was still sitting there. He walked by and acted like he was another of the guests who were coming and going from the wedding hall. Soon he saw a man and 2 kids about his age walk up. One looked like he was going to a Halloween party and the other was a redhead with a gourd. Naruto watched and saw as Tamari joined them before leaving. Something about the redhead bothered him. It was almost the same feeling he got from Yugito. As the crowd started to leave and break apart, Naruto knew he had to move or the man across the way from him would soon get suspicious, so he got up and walked toward the man and said, "Hey buddy, did you come for the party?" The rain nin looked at the guy who was about 20 years old in his opinion and said, "I don't answer idiots." Naruto said, "That's okay, I just wanted to know if it was invitation only or if anyone could enter. My sister is an idiot and kind of put a family heirloom in one of the wedding gifts and I wanted to get it before anyone found it. You wouldn't mind helping me get it? You are a ninja after all and I can pay you." As Naruto glanced around. The rain nin said, "Perhaps, tell me what was lost and how much you're willing to pay and I will let you know." Naruto said, "Well, it's a green necklace that my grandmother left behind that's supposed to be able to buy 3 mountains since it is made or a rare gem. I can pay you $500 if you can go and get it. Unfortunately I don't know which box it's in. All I know is my sister said that it was inside a jewelry box that she gave as a present." The rain nin said, "Sorry, not interested." Naruto said, "Well, thanks anyways. I guess I will have to find someone else to do it or do it myself. Hopefully no one will be guarding the presents." As he turned and left. When Naruto walked around the corner he smirked and dropped the henge and changed into his sexy no jutsu form with cloths on and walked back around the corner and saw the rain nin sneaking into the building. Naruto thought, "One thing I know about people is that they are greedy and perverted." Naruto saw a group of rain nin heading toward him and he hanged into the man who was inside and walked toward the others. A short man said, "Well, how did it go?" Naruto said, "Some Konoha nin showed up and acted like he owned everything but he's gone now but I think he's probably dead since an Iwa nin seemed to think he was the Yondaime." All 3 glanced at each other and Aoi said, "Well come on Andrew." As he turned to leave along with the others. Naruto followed them outside of town for about 10 minutes when all 3 jumped away and threw shurikens and kuniyas at him forcing Naruto to replace himself with a log. One said, "Oh, who are you and what have you done with our teammate?" Naruto sighed and said, "So how did you know it was me?" Aoi said, "Simple. The fact is that you said Yondaime instead of murderer since our teammate blames the Yondaime for the death of his brother. The second fact is I called you Andrew when his name is Gant." Naruto dropped the henge and all 3 gasped for a moment thinking he was his father but then they all prepared to fight. Naruto looked around and saw he was trapped in a triangle attack pattern and quickly created 200 kajbunshims to attack. Aoi threw his umbrella into the air and it started to rain needles down onto the clones destroying them all and they looked around trying to find Naruto who had vanished. Naruto had replaced himself with a kajbunshin and moved to hide in a hole in front of a tree roots and used his bloodline to grow a bush to cover his spot. He quickly gathered his breath and tried to figure out what to do next. Aoi screamed, "Find him. I want his head but don't kill him, I want answers as well." Naruto smirked and did a few hand signs and had a wood clone come out of the tree he was hiding in from the other side and the clone said, "Fine. You want answers." As he walked into the clearing only for a kuniya to hit him in the leg making him scream out in pain. One of the rain nins said, "It's him," as he jumped down to capture Naruto. Aoi and the other nin jumped down after he had captured the clone and said, "Okay boy, who are you and what do you want?" The clone said, I was told to find and follow you and confirm that you still had the Raijin. Aoi reached into a pouch and said, so you wanted to know if I had this, huh? As he held it up. Suddenly a vine appeared and slapped his wrist, causing him to drop the sword, and 50 more Kujbunshin appeared. Naruto, who was holding the vine, said, thanks for returning my family property, as he charged forward. The rain nins had been caught off guard, and when Aoi reached for his umbrella, the woodclone grabbed onto him from the back and wrapped his legs and arms around him, stopping him from unhooking the umbrella as well as from moving his arms. Naruto Kujbunshin were quickly beating the two other nins down as Naruto had dropped his weights before coming out of hiding. Naruto walked over while his clones were fighting and picked up the Raijin and asked, so how do you use this? Aoi said, I would never tell you. Naruto pocketed it and said, no matter. The name's Naruto Namikaze. Tell my ancestors I got their stuff back. And then placed his hand on the wood clone and sent chakra through the clone, and it shot out spikes from its chest right through Aoi. Naruto looked and saw the other two men had been beaten by his clones and would not be moving for a while, so he sighed and said, I hate this, and drew his sword and sliced Aoi head off. He then took out a scroll and sealed it into it. Naruto then looked at the mess around the area and had the Kujbunshins clean up all traces of his bloodline before they went up in smoke. Naruto walked away from the mess and Jiraiya appeared and said, good job, kid. Naruto was pissed and said, you could have helped me, Erozanin. Jiraiya said, true, but if I did that then you would not have learned anything. Besides, I already have my name out in the world, but you don't. If people saw me helping you, then they won't spread word like they will with just you doing it. I must say I like the trick you did back in town, but you forgot to get his name. Also, you need to work on your Tiahutsu. Naruto sighed and said, so how do I do that? Jiraiya handed Naruto a scroll and grabbed the one with the head of Aoi as well as the Raijin and said, that scroll contains your dad's fighting style. You should work at least 2 hours a day on learning the katas. You have a week before your next mission begins, but you need to work on the Rasengan as well as the Tiahutsu scroll I gave you, since you have already learned the Earth Jutsu I wanted you to learn. Here is also your next mission. As he handed another scroll before summoning a frog and hopping on its back and riding it away. Naruto said, that's it, if he leaves a different way one more time I am going to hurt him. Kakashi sighed as he walked into the Hokage office. He was glad that the people of Wave came and helped build the bridge with Gato dead. It allowed them to return sooner than expected. He said, mission accomplished, sir. The golden green flash bridge is now finished. The third said, really? Good job, though I have to know why it was named that. Lee screamed, it's because Naruto flames of youth burned so brightly that they named it after him and his green chakra and the golden flash he did. The third said, I see. Anything else happen on the bridge or anything I should know? Kakashi said, yes, I would like Sasuke removed from my team as I have nothing left to teach him since he's awakened his Sharingan and copied the Chidori without my approval. The third said, and what team would that be? Kakashi said, Team 7, sir. The third said, Kakashi, Sakura is currently apprenticing under Tsunade and Naruto is currently doing solo missions. Kakashi's eyes widened and a frog appeared on the third's desk with 3 scrolls and handed it to him. The third opened one that said report on it and said, I see, so he was able to complete not only the C rank mission but also the B and A rank ones as well. He even recovered the Raijin and killed Aoi as well as taken out a member of Atsuki. That good. Tell Jiraiya that I will have a team waiting for Naruto at his next mission to assist him. It's gone from an A- rank to S rank, but Naruto will be in charge. Everyone was wide-eyed and Sasuke asked, why is the Dobi getting higher rank missions and why is he going to be in charge? The third said, I don't have to answer you, Uchiha. Kakashi, request approved. I will find someone to teach him some humility or I will send him back to the academy. Sasuke went through some hand signs and started to power the Chidori up, and Kakashi was about to stop him when the third shook his head no. When Sasuke charged, he was suddenly hit with enough force that it broke his nose and sent him out the door and knocked out. The third said as he sat back down, Abnu, take Sasuke Uchiha to Ibiki and have him lock him up for a week for attacking me. 2ABNU appeared and grabbed Sasuke before leaving. Neji asked, forgive me for asking Hokage-sama, but does Naruto Uzumaki have a bloodline? The third said, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze does indeed have a bloodline, but all information on it has been labeled a secret by the Namikaze clan. Neji nods and said, "Thank you Hokage-sama." Kakashi was white as a ghost and said, "Namikaze, as in?" The third said, "Yes, he's his son." Lee was confused and said, "Who are the Namikaze clan?" The third said, "It is an S-rank secret of the village that only the Hokage knows for now. Now if that is all, I would like to speak with Kakashi privately." Lee and Neji both left and Kakashi asked, "Why did you not tell me Sensei had a son?" The third said, "Simple, if you would have known, what would you have done? If you want to know the whole truth, ask his clan head." Kakashi looked down and asked, "Whose is his clan head?" The third said, "Tsunade. She's at her family grounds now, so go talk to her. I am sure you will find some very useful news. Oh, before I forget, give this to Suant," as he unsealed the Raijin and handed it to Kakashi. Kakashi nods and leaves in a swirl of leaves. Everyone in Konoha, well, almost everyone knew where the Showdime's home was. When Kakashi arrived, he saw Sakura and Tenten both panting heavy as they were handing upside down from a tree with chakra while holding a bucket full of water below their heads with chakra. He was wide-eyed and Tsunade said, "Hello Kakashi, what can I do for you?" Kakashi turned and said, "I came to talk to you about the Namikaze clan." Tsunade said, "Oh, I see. Well, let's go inside. Girls, take a break and come inside," as she turned and started walking inside. Sakura and Tenten both fell and the water soaked them as they fell faster than it did. Kakashi followed inside and saw Shizune and Sakura mom working inside the house, and Zabuza and Haku were both sitting playing a game of Go. Tsunade said, "Take a seat Kakashi." Kakashi glanced around and said, Is it okay to talk here? I mean, it is private." Sakura and Tenten both came in with a towel over their heads and took a seat, and Tsunade said, "Sure. Everyone here knows more than you anyways." Kakashi sighed and said, "First I was told to give this to you." As he pulled out the Raijin, and Tsunade looked at it and said, "Sakura, catch," and tossed it to her as she was wide-eyed. Tsunade asked, "How did you get it? I thought it was stolen." Kakashi said, "It was in a scroll Jiraiya sent. Apparently Naruto got it back." Tenten perked up and asked, "What has Naruto-kun been up to?" Kakashi looked at Tsunade asking if it was alright, and she nodded and said, "Naruto apparently has completed a CBA rank mission so far and has killed the man who took the Raijin as well as a member of Atsuki." Zabuza asked, "Which one?" as he walked over. Kakashi said, "I don't know. What are you doing here anyways?" Tsunade said, "He's an official bodyguard of the Namikaze clan." "Now what did you want Kakashi?" Kakashi asked, "Why was I not told Naruto was a Namikaze, and since when has it become a clan, and what bloodline does he have?" Tsunade said, "Well, as far as no one telling you, it was sort of a secret to everyone that only the third and Minato knew. Not even his wife who gave birth to him knew she had him." Kakashi asked, "How is that possible? Shouldn't she have known that she was no longer with child?" Kushina sighed and said, "Not when you had twins and did not know it, and the nurse who delivered them died a little later because of an idiot," as she walked over. Kakashi looked at her and knew it was Sakura mom, but thought about her answer and narrowed his eyes and asked, "Then who was his twin?" Sakura looked around and Tsunade nodded and she said, "That would be me Kakashi sensei." Kakashi was wide-eyed and looked at Sakura. He had not one but two of his sensei's kids on his team and he ignored them both. He felt truly terrible now. Tenten asked, "Do you know anything else about Naruto-kun?" Kakashi said, "No, that was all I heard before Sasuke attacked the Hokage." Tsunade said, "You got your hands full with that one Kakashi." Kakashi said, "No, I don't. I kicked him off of my team after I could not stand him any longer and he copied my Chidori." Sakura asked, "So what does that mean? I know Naruto, Haku and I are all a team when he gets back. Are you going to be our sensei?" Kakashi sighed and said, "I hope so." Tsunade asked, "Why? So you can fail them as a teacher?" Kakashi winced knowing it was true and said, "No, I was ordered by the council to work mostly with the Uchiha. I saw Naruto and Sakura both try and get him to work as a team and he would not. I would have failed the team the first day with him on it had it not been for the council making it where I was not allowed to." Sakura asked, What will happen to him now? Kakashi said. The third sent him to Ibiki and to be locked up for a week to calm down. After that he's someone else's problem. So would someone explain what's going on? It's all a shock. Over the next hour everyone filled Kakashi in and now we find him gapping and said, so Naruto was the main character in that book and it was with Anko and Kurenai. He stopped laughing when Kushina blasted him with ki enough to make Tsunade flinch and said, please don't speak of this again in my presence. I don't like knowing how my son was taken care of. Kakashi nods and said, I will make sure not to say anything. And thought, in your presence. I am so blackmailing those two. Kakashi left that night happier than he had been in a long time. The news he was given made him feel great. Inside Konoha prison Sasuke Uchiha woke up and looked around and said, what the hell am I doing here? I am an Uchiha. A voice from the next cell said, shut up Sasuke. I had enough of you in the academy. Sasuke looked out the cell and saw Mizuki in the next one and he asked, what the hell are you doing here? Mizuki said, they locked me up for trying to kill the Kyuubi brat. Sasuke was confused and Mizuki smirked and said, so what are you here for? Sasuke explained how the Dobi was getting special treatment and he was locked up. Mizuki nods and said, how would you like a chance to get even with the Kyuubi brat as well as get stronger to defeat your brother? Sasuke said, why do you keep calling him the Kyuubi brat? Mizuki said, Uzumaki. He has the Kyuubi inside of him. It was sealed in him the day he was born making him the new Kyuubi. The third passed a law saying we could not tell you so he could live. Sasuke eyes widened and asked, how can I get stronger? Mizuki said, can you bust me out of here? I can take you to someone who can give you power. Sasuke smirked before he started to do hand signs and soon grabbed his wrist and punched a Chidori through his cell's lock. He was tired after doing it but he left and soon returned with the key and unlocked Mizuki's cell. Mizuki nods and releases all the criminals and both make their escape. Mizuki leads Sasuke out into the forest and quickly knocked out Sasuke and grabbed him and took off toward sound. He made it about 5 miles outside of the village when a silver-haired ninja appeared in front of him with glasses on and said, you did well Mizuki. Mizuki said, thank you Kabuto-san and thank Orochimaru for allowing me another chance to redeem myself. Kabuto nods and said, let me check him before we leave, and activated a jutsu that made his hand glow blue. He walked over and hovered them above Sasuke and then slashed them across Mizuki's neck slicing it off making him gape for air. Kabuto said, Orochimaru does not take failures and since you redeemed yourself I let you have a quick death, and grabbed Sasuke and took off toward sound. The third was awoken the next morning by Abnu who informed him that all of the prisoners had been set free and Mizuki was found in the woods and the scent of the Uchiha along with another lead away from the village. Things had taken a unique twist.